Chapter 1899. Just like that, Noah fought a few more battles with the demons of the Jumanli's kin before the special training for the day came to an end. Thank you for your hard work, teacher. The Jumanli's kin lined up neatly as if they were in a physical education class and bowed to Noah. That was their daily routine. Thank you for your hard work too. Noah nodded and spoke. By the way, I may be going on a long trip soon. I don't know how long it will take, so once I'm gone, you can train according to your own pace. All of the Jumengli family members were stunned upon hearing this. Isha tilted her head and said with an innocent expression. Teacher, are you going on a long trip? Do you need me to prepare your lunch? No need. Noah shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Don't worry about my 3 meals. It will be taken care of when I get there. Besides, I have prepared a lot of food and water in my gift card. I won't starve to death. The rest of the Jumanli's kin smiled, but they found Isha's naivety quite cute. But soon, her expression turned serious. Teacher, are you going to the vampire's territory? That's right. Noah did not hide it and nodded directly. Now, all the mythical forces have reached a peace agreement. Only the vampires have not expressed their stance, and have even shown very obvious signs of resistance. Previously, because the other mythical forces had not reached a peace agreement, Sazax and Asashel wanted to focus their energy on that side for the time being, so they could only be in a stalemate with the vampires. Now, it's time for a showdown. As early as more than a month ago, Asashel had asked Noah to go with him to the vampire's territory. But before that, the peace agreement with the other mythical forces had to be reached first. Only after dealing with this matter perfectly could Asashel be free. Just yesterday, Asashel contacted Noah. The conclusion of the peace agreement between the various mythical forces had reached the final stage, and the coordination and cooperation in all aspects had been finalized. In the next few days, they should be able to set off for the vampire's territory. I believe that now that all the forces have reached a peace agreement, and only the vampires are left alone, they won't ignore this matter anymore, right? Noah curled his lips. Otherwise, when the time comes, the vampires will not be enemies with one force alone, but with the forces of the world. That being said, it was definitely impossible to force them, or rather, it was meaningless. How could there be peace through coercion? Since it was for the sake of world peace, then coercion was absolutely out of the question. Therefore, as the governor of the fallen angels, Ashel felt that it was necessary for him to personally show his sincerity. In addition, with the Godslayer as a witness accompanying him, presumably, the vampires would have to seriously consider the peace agreement, right? Asashel also said that if you want to go with him, it's also possible. Noah turned his gaze to one of the Jumanli's kin. After all, we also have people who have some connections with the vampires, don't we? Hearing Noah's words, the Jumanli's kin gathered their gazes on Gasper. No. Gasper shook his head very fiercely, tears even welling up in his eyes. I don't want to meet the other vampires. I don't want to go to the vampire's territory either. Looking at Gasper's violent reaction, he believed that anyone could have noticed it, right? This hybrid of vampire and human had a past and memories that were unbearable to recall. That's it, teacher. Laius touched Gasper's head, who looked like he was about to cry, and sighed regretfully. Considering Gasper's mood, we can't go with him. I know. Noah spread his hands. Originally, I just wanted to expand your horizons, and Gasper's identity is a vampire, so I thought of letting you follow. I'm not forcing you. Minister. Gasper said dejectedly. I'm sorry, don't mind it, Gasper, Laius said gently. You're my lovely servant, it's natural for me to think of you. To us, Gasper is irreplaceable. Zhu Nai also showed his gentle side. You don't have to apologize for this kind of thing. The rest of the Jumanli's kin also comforted him, and Gasper was touched. Then, it's decided that you Jumanli's kin will not participate. Noah clapped his hands, attracting everyone's attention. I'll go alone from our side, and Isashal doesn't seem to bring any guards. It seems that this time, it's just me and Isashal accompanying each other. In my opinion, if teacher and the viceroy are together, then there's no need for guards, Laius said sincerely. But if you need someone to accompany you, why don't you bring Sidi's kin? Kangna. Noah thought for a while and nodded. Then you contact Kangna and ask her what she thinks. Anyway, there are still a few days before we depart. Understood. Laius agreed without hesitation. Thus, the group of people disbanded. By the way, in the corner of the training ground, Orpheus had been sitting on a bench, eating snacks while watching everyone train. That was Orpheus' favorite thing to do. Of course, Orpheus' favorite thing to do was not to stay silent, but to silently observe the actions of the people around him. Sometimes, he would even imitate them. She looked just like a child who was learning how to walk. Although her tender and cute face did not show any emotion, she still gave people a very cute feeling. After everyone was dismissed, Noah looked at Orpheus, who was sitting in the corner, and sighed in his heart. If it was anyone else, and half of their strength had been taken away, they would have already lost their heads and tried to find a way to regain their lost strength. However, Orpheus did not care about his own power at all. Ever since half of his power was taken away more than a month ago, he was still living a carefree life as before. The only thing that changed was that Orpheus no longer talked about defeating the real Emperor Crimson Dragon, and seemed to have given up on that goal. After all, Orpheus had not only lost half of his power, but also went from infinite to limited. Compared to his heyday, he was much weaker. Under such circumstances, with Orpheus' current power, if he were to face the real Emperor Crimson Dragon, he would definitely not be able to survive 3 moves even if he was not killed instantly. But even so, Orpheus, who had only half of his power left and had gone from infinite to limited, was still the strongest in the world. Now that Orpheus had lost his infinite power, he had slid down from 3 digits, but did not fall to 4 digits. In other words, Orpheus was now in between 3 digits and 4 digits. He was weaker than 3 digits, but stronger than 4 digits. It was a very ambiguous realm. In the past, even if the rest of the top 10 in the world joined forces, they would not be able to defeat Orpheus in one move. Now, although Orpheus was still the strongest in the world, the gap between them was not as wide as before. If possible, I should help Orpheus get back his lost power, Noah thought to himself. Even if Orpheus doesn't care, I can't let his power be used by the Disaster Squad. Moreover, Noah was also very concerned about the half of power that Orpheus had lost. That was because the Disaster Squad was preparing to use that half of his power to create a clone of Orpheus. Maybe, I'll have to make another Orpheus an enemy in the future, Noah sighed. At this moment, Orpheus, who was sitting quietly in the corner eating snacks, suddenly stopped what he was doing and raised his head to look up. Noah noticed this detail and was stunned for a moment before he walked forward. What's wrong? Orpheus. Orpheus retracted his gaze and turned to Noah. Obviously, to Orpheus, Noah was more important. Then, Orpheus spoke. There's the aura of an evil dragon. Noah narrowed his eyes slightly when he heard that. Chapter 1900. The training space for the Jumanli's family was connected to the Supernatural Research Department's office in Cold King Academy through a fixed teleportation formation. Therefore, when Noah moved out of the training space and arrived at the Paranormal Research Department's office, he came out of the office and arrived at the empty space outside the old school building. His superb sensing ability allowed him to sense an evil presence. The aura was very weak, but it wasn't hidden at all. It seemed like the owner of the aura was quite a distance away from Cold King Academy. However, Noah, who had superb senses, could still sense the aura clearly no matter how difficult it was to detect it. Noah's feelings seemed to have been transmitted to Draeger's body, causing Draeger's voice to sound in Noah's mind. This is the aura of an evil dragon. Evil dragon. Noah was slightly taken aback before he asked. What's that? A type of dragon. Rather than a type of dragon, it's more like a name for a specific type of dragon. Draeger explained. In the dragon clan, those extremely dangerous and uncontrollable creatures are called that. There are also some terrifying existences that appear in various myths and legends. Dragons that appear in various myths and legends? Noah frowned. Seeing this, Draeg explained. For example, Dark Dragon of the New Moon, Kromkruch, Forbidden Dragon of the Mana Source Az Dahaka, Dark Dragon of the Primordial Apophis, Violent Dragon of the Great Sin Grendel, Guardian Dragon of the Precious Tree Laden, and so on. They are all very famous evil dragons in various myths and legends. Needless to say, they are extremely dangerous. Especially Kromkruch, Az Dahaka, and Apophis. One of them killed the king of the gods in Celtic mythology, one of them is an evil god in the Zoroastrianism, and the last one tried to seal the entire world in Egyptian mythology into darkness. There was no need for a detailed explanation. Just by listening to Drake's explanation, one could tell how dangerous the three evil dragons were. This was especially so for Noah, who was very knowledgeable about all kinds of myths and legends. He knew just how terrifying these three evil dragons were. Of course, that was in myths and legends. In the real world, or rather in this world, it was not enough to know how powerful the evil dragons were. Noah asked. How is the evil dragon's strength compared to you, a heavenly dragon who is ranked among the top 10 in the world? If you're referring to when I was alive, then I'm naturally stronger as a sky dragon. A sky dragon is an existence that surpasses all other dragons and is only below the dragon god, Drake said as if he was talking about someone else. However, the weakest of the legendary level evil dragons mentioned just now are at least at the Dragon King level. Clone Koa, Az Dahaka, and Apophis are all at the top of the Dragon King level, just below the Heavenly Dragon level. If the opponent is just an ordinary god, it should be possible to kill one or two of them, right? Dragons with the title of Dragon King were at least at the Demon King level. In other words, the Dragon Kings were all at the top of the 5 digits. As for the 3 representative evil dragons that Drake mentioned, there were at least 4 digits of them. After all, these 3 evil dragons were not weaker than the gods in their respective myths and legends. As a result, Noah was puzzled. How come I've never heard of such powerful dragons? To be more precise, he had never heard of their activities in this world. Otherwise, the number and ranking of the 5 great dragon kings would change. In response, Drake only sighed. There's nothing strange about it. Even the 2 heavenly dragons were killed and sealed, so how could the evil dragons be left alone? The so-called evil dragons were extremely cruel and uncontrollable, so they were all sealed and destroyed. Even one of the 5 great dragon kings was sealed, and his soul was cut into several pieces and lodged in several divine artifacts. It was even worse than the 2 heavenly dragons. At this point, Drake was confused again. But why would the aura of the evil dragons, which should have been sealed and destroyed, appear again? Drake's confusion was the same as Noah's. No matter what, let's go and find out. Noah said decisively. The aura of the evil dragons is so dense, it won't be hard to find them. Be careful, partner. Drake immediately said. The evil dragons are extremely difficult to deal with. Even we, the dragon race, avoid them like the plague. Those guys' brains are basically all damaged, and none of them are mentally sound. You definitely won't lose to the evil dragons, but it's disgusting to be entangled with them. If you really fight, don't show any mercy, and kill them cleanly. From Drake's words, one could tell how great the evil dragon's ability to attract hatred was. Moreover, not only did he say that the evil dragons were troublesome, he even said that they were disgusting. It was clear that even the sky dragons didn't want to deal with the evil dragons. Noah naturally didn't want to be disgusted by the evil dragons for nothing, but the fact that the evil dragons released their auras so brazenly meant that they didn't care about the forces stationed in Chariot King Town. Just the fact that the evil dragons were at least at the level of a dragon king or demon king was already a huge problem. Therefore, if the evil dragons were as annoying and disgusting as Draeger described them to be, then, there's no need for me to show any mercy. Noah muttered to himself. Then, he thought of Laius and the others, and turned to Orpheus. Orpheus, I'll go and deal with the evil dragons. Can you help me protect the people of Jiming's family? Hearing that, Orpheus looked up and met Noah's gaze, and nodded. In the next second, Orpheus disappeared without a trace. It was as if he had merged into the night, and even his aura had completely vanished. Noah was relieved. His body flashed, and he disappeared as well. He turned into a streak of light and shot into the sky, heading in a certain direction. At this time, the sky had already darkened. Noah and the Jiming's family members had always been training after school. They would attend classes as usual, and enter the training space immediately after school. Naturally, they had to continue training until night time, with the exception of holidays. Noah flew through the night sky, braving the chilly night wind. His sensory ability spread out like a domain, enveloping his surroundings. Noah firmly grasped the trace of the evil dragon's aura in the air, and with the feedback from his sensory ability, he rushed in the direction of the aura. As Noah flew, the trace of the evil dragon's aura in the air became denser, proving that Noah was heading in the right direction. However, just as Noah was about to reach the location of the aura, the owner of the aura suddenly moved. The other party had sensed that someone was approaching them. In other words, the other party had discovered Noah's arrival. However, under such circumstances, not only did the other party not flee in a hurry, but they suddenly charged in Noah's direction at an astonishing speed. Noticing this, Noah raised an eyebrow and stopped in his tracks. At the same time, Dalag's voice rang out in Noah's mind. They're here. Noah saw Dalag's voice as soon as he finished speaking. In the night sky in front of him, a gigantic black shadow suddenly appeared. Roar! A thunderous roar turned into a sound wave that reverberated throughout the night sky of Chariot King Town. After the roar, the other party's loud laughter rang out. Someone actually took the initiative to come to me. That's great. I didn't act on my own accord. It's an enemy attack. I have to face them head on. With such loud laughter, the black shadow was like a gigantic meteor, bringing with it the sound of the wind. Amidst the roar and laughter that had yet to completely subside, it charged straight in Noah's direction without any deviation. That momentum was like a fighter jet charging straight at Noah's direction. Even though it was still hundreds of meters away, the strong wind from the impact blew fiercely, causing Noah's robes to flutter. In response, Noah only narrowed his eyes slightly, and his entire body began to fluctuate with an extremely dense aura. The distance between the two instantly reduced to 0. Chapter 1901. Dong! In the sky above Chariot King Town, the originally calm night sky suddenly trembled with a thunderous boom, causing a shockwave to sweep out like a violent gale, stirring up the atmosphere. It was extremely shocking. Amidst the boom, two figures, one big and one small, flew out from the epicenter of the shockwave, creating friction in the air. Amidst the sharp sound of the shockwave breaking through the air, they opened up a distance of more than 100 meters before they could stabilize themselves. Noah's body shook as he froze in midair. He felt a slight numbness all over his body as he raised his head and looked forward. Only then did Noah get a good look at his opponent. It was a giant. That's right. A giant. However, this giant had a ferocious dragon head, sharp dragon claws, and a thick dragon tail. There was also a pair of dragon wings on its back that were slightly larger than its body. It looked like a giant draconian. Its height easily exceeded 30 meters, which was many times larger than Noah. Its scales were light black. Its eyes were light silver. However, there were dark green ripples on his body. From the waves, Noah felt an evil presence. In the eyes of the giant, Noah felt a suffocating madness. Glendale. Draeger's shocked voice rang in Noah's mind. It's him. Glendale. Noah stood up in surprise and finally looked at the giant draconian. He's Glendale. The Tyrannosaurus Rex of Great Sin Glendale. It was one of the legendary evil dragons that Draeger had mentioned before. Speaking of this evil dragon, one had to mention a Norse hero, Beowulf. He was very famous in Norse mythology as a hero who had slain 3 monsters in his life. Glendale was one of the monsters that Beowulf had slain. The giant seemed to be able to hear Draeger's voice. Its scale-covered eyelids trembled slightly as it spoke in surprise. This voice is so familiar. Don't tell me it's Draeger. It's me. Draeger's voice began to come from Noah's body. I didn't expect you to remember me. I thought you didn't have anything else in your head other than fighting. What? Does that mean it's really Draeg? Glendale's voice sounded more and more surprised. What's wrong? Why are you hiding in a little guy's body? Are you not going to come out? You're still as rude as before. Drake's tone was unusually displeased. Undoubtedly, you were killed by the first Beowulf. Why did you suddenly revive? That kind of thing doesn't matter at all. Glendale's silver eyes flashed with ruthlessness. Compared to that, Draeg, since you're already here, hurry up and come out. Let's have a long-awaited battle. Seeing Glendale's aura turning violent, Noah frowned and told Draeger. Are you old acquaintances? It's just that annoying guy back then pestered me and I taught him a lesson. Draeger said. That guy is a lunatic who has nothing in his mind other than fighting. But in terms of strength, I'm afraid that he can surpass more than half of the current 5 great dragon kings. Partner, when you fight with that guy, you don't need to hold back. Otherwise, you will really be entangled by him until you die. From Draeger's constant emphasis on, don't have to be merciful, one could tell how difficult it was to deal with the evil dragon named Glendale. Not in terms of strength, but in terms of spirit. If you don't beat him until he can't stand up, he won't let you go. Draeger's voice was filled with disgust as if he was deeply hurt. That's why you'd better use your forbidden technique and completely crush that guy. Before Noah could react to Draeger's words, Glendale on the other side yelled in agitation. Crush me. Good, good. Come and try. Hurry up and crush me. Hurry up. Along with the laughter, Glendale was the first to lose his patience. After roaring, he flapped his dragon wings, stirring up a strong gust of wind, and shot towards Noah. Undoubtedly, Glendale's speed was faster than a bullet despite his enormous size. The sharp sound of air breaking rang out again. The huge body stirred up waves of air as it charged forward. It rushed in front of Noah with a great momentum and raised one of its dragon hands high up in the air. Immediately after, Glendale clenched his hand into a fist. Unlike ordinary dragons who fought with their sharp dragon claws, Glendale was like a giant. Amidst the whistling sound, Glendale fiercely threw a punch at Noah. Wherever that punch passed, the air was completely squeezed clean. It was accompanied by a shocking sonic boom as it heavily smashed down like a mountain. Under that punch, Noah was simply like an ant. He was pitifully small and couldn't even compare to Glendale's fist. Thus, in Noah's vision, that enormous fist was like a dark patch of sky, falling towards him. Feeling the terrifying might of that simple punch, Noah had reason to believe that even if a mountain was hit, it would crumble into pieces. That was truly a blow that could split a mountain. A blow from a legendary evil dragon was so terrifying. However, in the face of such a blow, Noah's eyes didn't waver in the slightest. Instead, he raised his own fist and viciously punched out. He didn't use magic. He didn't use magic. After losing his ability value, Noah's body had regressed to the level of a human. Under the situation where he didn't use any magic, he used an ordinary punch to welcome the blow of the dragon that was as heavy as a mountain and as powerful as a meteor. In the next second, the two fists of different sizes, one big and one small, collided with a loud bang. Dong! A thunderous sound echoed through the night sky, penetrating through the horizon. The surging shockwave shook the entire heaven and earth. Then, just like at the beginning, the center of the shockwave, one big and one small figure flew out like they were struck by lightning. The sharp sound of breaking through the air echoed, stirring up the atmosphere. Once again, they pulled apart a few hundred meters before coming to a stop. They were evenly matched. Glendale looked at Noah's direction in astonishment. Of course, Noah was unharmed from head to toe. He wasn't at a disadvantage in the slightest. Is this for real? Glendale asked in a daze. A human's fist is actually evenly matched with mine. As he muttered to himself, Glendale's enormous body started to tremble. It wasn't because of trembling, but because of excitement. Is this for real? Is this for real? Is this for real? Glendale was so excited that he started to talk like a madman. Is that still a human? Is that still a human? Even that bastard Beowulf wouldn't dare to take my fist head on, right? What? What? There's actually such a great human. Bastard! Bastard! If those who knew about Noah's situation saw this scene, they would be equally shocked. It would have been fine if Noah had used his enhanced magic, but without enhanced magic and without enhanced magic, Noah's body that had reverted back to the human realm should have been smashed into minced meat by Glendale's punch. In the end, Noah was able to take the legendary evil dragon's fist head on, and he wasn't at a disadvantage. This was Noah's harvest after more than a month. Gazing at Glendale, who was laughing maniacally, Noah slowly clenched his numb fists. His brows slightly furrowed as he muttered to himself. So hard, it was indeed very hard. With Noah's current arm strength, his fist didn't even break Glendale's scales. Instead, his palm felt numb. This was enough to prove the toughness of Glendale's scales. Glendale's scales are famous for their toughness. It's the toughest among all dragons. Back then, I was only able to shatter his scales after increasing my strength. Drake said. I told you to use Forbidden Hand. Otherwise, you'll only be entangled by that madman. Forbidden Hand is the highest level of divine equipment. Wouldn't it be too cheap to use it casually? Noah's eyes flickered. Why don't you let me try out my new strength? Chapter 1902. In fact, Noah had wanted to solve the drawbacks of strengthening magic for a long time. At the beginning, Noah became a god slayer. Because of his physique, it led to the mutation of his authority. Even the magic he mastered was no longer attached to the root of the world of the shaped moon. It no longer needed to be connected to the magic base plate and became independent from the magic of the shaped moon world. Under such circumstances, Noah's magic was no longer limited by the root of the shaped moon world and could develop independently. Under the stimulation of the infinite magic brought by the third perpetual smart personality, it had the amazing effect of strengthening the user's physical ability to the 5-digit peak level. It could be regarded as a miracle. However, there was a drawback of this strengthening magic. No, that's not right. There was no drawback of strengthening magic itself. It's just that when using this magic, if Noah wanted to get the power comparable to the 5-digit peak, then he needed to use all the magic he could control to strengthen it. Once there was less magic support, the degree of strengthening would also decrease. The result was that once Noah used strengthening magic, there was no way to use the other powers that needed to be stimulated. For example, the Elven device. When Noah used the Elven device, he needed to convert his own energy into divine might. Therefore, once the elven device was used, the strengthening magic that needed magic support could not be used. Of course, that referred to the situation when Noah fully stimulated the power of the elven device. Noah could convert his own energy into magic and divine might at the same time, and use magic and the elven device at the same time. However, it was said before that controlling one type of energy alone was undoubtedly more convenient than controlling two types of energy at the same time. If the difficulty was reduced, the more energy could be used, and the stronger the power that Noah could exert. In this way, if he used two types of energy at the same time, it would be better to use one type of energy, that way he could be stronger. This caused Noah to be unable to use the other powers when using strengthening magic unless he reduced the power of strengthening. That was undoubtedly a drawback. Therefore, when Noah used the elven device, he used the body enhancement effect of the absolute sword skill to enhance his physical abilities instead of using it together with magic enhancement. Otherwise, Noah would have been able to defeat Lotus and Nubia easily. He didn't even need to activate the another cosmology to deal with the three mad elf kings. Otherwise, he would have been able to deal with them easily. In view of this, Noah had always wanted to solve this problem so that he could use the rest of his power while using enhancement magic. After more than a month of research, Noah finally succeeded. At this time, in Noah's body, endless energy was flowing in an orderly manner. It was like a cycle, forming a pattern of electric wires. It was exactly the same as the magic patterns that were added to the target of the enhancement spell when it was activated. Noah borrowed the magic of this world and used rituals and tactics to reproduce the magic power of demons, so that his energy was no longer simply stored in his body like before. Instead, it circulated like veins, forming the magic patterns to activate enhancement magic. Simply put, it was using the energy in his body to draw a magic array. In this way, as long as the energy in Noah's body was not exhausted, the enhancement magic would continue to work forever. Does it sound familiar? That's right, it's a perpetual motion machine. Only Noah, who had the third perpetual smart personality, could do permanent strengthening. Now, the endless energy in Noah's body has been fixed to flow in this cycle. No matter which type of energy Noah converted, the enhancement magic could always be used passively. Although the energy that needed to be consumed would still be consumed, it would change from active to passive. This meant that Noah no longer had to be distracted to control it and could use the energy in his body to use other powers. In addition, the energy in Noah's body also had the characteristic of being converted at any time. Not only could it convert into magic power, divine power, and even divine might at will, but it could also convert any energy in Noah's memory. Because it could only convert energy, Noah did not pay much attention to this characteristic in the past. However, after returning to this world, Noah realized that he was wasting God's gift. Because the magic power of demons and the light power of angels were also a type of energy. However, the magic power of demons could be added to their attributes through imagination, turning into storms, flames, lightning, and other attacks. The light power of angels had the characteristic of shaping, condensing into various shapes such as sabers, swords, spears, halberds, and so on. If Noah converted the energy into the magic power of demons and the light power of angels, would he have these two powers? The answer, yes. However, on this basis, Noah made some adjustments. Looking at Glendale's ecstatic appearance of wanting to rush over again, Noah's mind moved, and the energy flowing in his body instantly transformed. What did it transform into? Divine power. Ever since his authority had entered a state of upgrade, he could no longer use divine power. A resplendent golden shockwave suddenly vibrated from Noah's body, spreading out in all directions like a hurricane. Shortly after, within that resplendent golden shockwave, a spear of light suddenly condensed, flashing with dazzling radiance. Like a military formation, it filled the entire space around Noah. It was not a spear of light condensed from the power of light, but a spear of light condensed from divine power. Fallen angels were the form of angels after they fell. Angels were life forms created by God using divine power. In other words, the source of light power was the power of God. Noah's divine power also came from God, and in terms of grade and rank, it was definitely higher than light power. Therefore, Noah added the shape-shifting characteristic of the power of light to his divine power, allowing his divine power to also possess the shape-shifting characteristic. What was the difference between a spear of light condensed from divine power that was one level higher than light power, compared to the spears of light of angels and fallen angels? The answer could be seen from the huge spears of light that filled the space around Noah, as well as Glendale's abrupt laughter that stopped abruptly. The next moment, the spears of light that were far larger than Glendale's body were like flashes of light, piercing through the vast sky and shooting towards Glendale's direction. Glendale's face was filled with shock, feeling the power contained in the huge spears of light. Without thinking, he raised his arms in front of him and made a defensive posture. Bang 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 bang. The huge spears of light that covered the sky and earth crashed onto Glendale's huge body, triggering a series of explosions that shook the space. Flames and strong light appeared in mid-air and gradually expanded. Oh! Glendale's anguished howls resounded in the midst of the flames and strong light. Then, an astonishing shock wave blasted out from the center of the explosion, dispersing the intense flames and dazzling light. Glendale seemed to have fallen into a berserk state as he frantically swung his fists, smashing away the huge spears of light that were attacking him. Upon closer inspection, the scales on Glendale's body were actually oozing with blood. This proved that Glendale wasn't able to completely withstand the wave of spears of light with the hardness of his scales. So, Glendale switched from defense to offense. As he punched away the incoming spears of light, he flapped the dragon wings on his back and charged toward Noah at an astonishing speed, bringing with him a frightening aura of malice and evil. You actually broke through my scales? Undoubtedly, you're just a lowly human. Again. His injuries didn't enrage Glendale, instead, he became more and more ecstatic. He roared loudly as he swung his fist, ignoring the scales on his fist that were gradually cracking. Then, he charged towards Noah without hesitation. Seeing this, Noah only sneered and raised his hand. The divine power that surged from Noah's body immediately surged and turned into chains of light. Like pythons, they suddenly shot out and met Glendale. Chapter 1903. In the blink of an eye. Just as Glendale was about to strike Noah with all his might, the nimble python-like chains of light formed from divine power cut through the air and arrived in front of Glendale. Drake had said that the evil dragon's mind was filled with nothing but battle. It was a complete lunatic. No one would want to be entangled by such a lunatic. However, in Noah's opinion, this lunatic was the easiest to deal with. This was because Noah was certain that Glendale would only rely on his instincts and impulses in battle. He definitely wouldn't use his brain. That was why Noah had predicted that Glendale would charge straight at him. Just like that, while Glendale was still swinging his fists and smashing away the gigantic light spears, the chains of light silently swept past him. Before Glendale could react, a series of thick chains of light wrapped around the evil dragon's gigantic body and bound it tightly in the air. Tisk! Glendale smacked his lips in disdain. What's the use of this thing? While spitting out such arrogant words, Glendale exerted strength all over his body. All the muscles under his scales bulged and his veins popped out one after another. Roar, roar, roar. Amidst the roar, Glendale burst out in rage, tugging at the chains of light that wrapped around his body. The chains rattled loudly, and even the sound of steel cracking could be heard. However, under such circumstances, not only did the thick chains of light not break, they even tightened around Glendale's gigantic body without showing any signs of breaking. What? Glendale was finally shocked. You can't tear it apart. Tear it apart. Noah laughed sarcastically. If it was just the ordinary power of light, perhaps with your strength, you could even tear apart the light of a Sashel and Michael. Unfortunately, I am not using the power of light. I am using a divine power of a higher level than that. It's impossible to tear it apart. After saying that, Noah slowly raised his hand. Whang! The surging divine power gathered in Noah's hand and gradually formed a bow of light. Noah's deep, dark eyes stared straight at Glendale, who was struggling to break free from the shackles of the chains of light. With a calm expression, he pulled the bowstring. The surging divine power once again converged. As Noah drew the bow, it formed an extremely dazzling arrow of light. Your scales seem to be the hardest scales of the dragon clan, right? Noah said faintly. Then let me see if your scales are harder than my arrow of light. As soon as he finished speaking. Whoosh! The dazzling arrow of light was like a resplendent meteor, streaking across the deep night sky, dragging a long tail of light behind it. Amidst the sharp sound of breaking through the air, it disappeared in a flash. Roar! 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 Glendale roared angrily. Under Glendale's furious roar, the dazzling arrow of light swept over and landed heavily on the dragon's body. Dong! In that instant, in the pitch-black moonlit night, a burst of strong light suddenly appeared. It was as if a full moon had exploded in mid-air, triggering a loud sound and violent impact that swept through the clouds of Chariot King Town. The clouds were extremely fragile and scattered. The atmosphere was cleanly and neatly disrupted. Even the space was like the surface of a lake that had a huge rock thrown into it. Under the violent impact and intense sound waves, circles of ripples appeared and there were slight distortions. That scene was like the explosion of a star. With such a huge commotion, even the residents of Chariot King Town were startled awake. They thought that a storm was coming and thunder was rumbling. Each of them had lingering fears. Only the demons, angels, and fallen angels who stayed behind to guard Chariot King Town noticed that something was wrong and began to stir. After the demons, angels, and fallen angels left behind to guard Chariot King Town, the huge commotion in the sky gradually subsided. The bow of light in Noah's hand gradually dissipated. The sturdy chains of light also turned into halos and disappeared. Raising his eyes, Noah stared ahead and muttered to himself, "That's right. It's really quite tough." Taking a closer look, in front of Noah, at the location of the explosion, Glendale's figure reappeared in the air. However, the scales on the gigantic evil dragon's body were almost completely shattered. Large amounts of blood spurted out from the skin underneath and dripped down continuously. Under the direct attack of the arrow of light, Glendale was heavily injured. However, Noah had already used all the divine power he could control in that attack. Logically speaking, even the Demon King and Dragon King wouldn't be able to withstand such an attack. Yet, Glendale did. However, that evil dragon was already fatally injured. It would be difficult for it to even stand, right? Just as Noah was thinking, the heavily injured Glendale slowly raised its drooping head. What? The scales on the evil dragon's face were all shattered and covered in green blood. However, it didn't seem to feel anything. The corner of its mouth twitched and revealed an extremely sinister and joyful smile. "Aren't you quite capable? Human brat." Glendale ignored the injuries all over its body and twisted its neck with a joyful expression. Noah couldn't help but be stunned when he saw that. "Didn't I say so?" Drake's voice became heavy. "That guy is a lunatic. If we don't beat him to a pulp, no matter how serious his injuries are, he will stand up as if nothing happened. In his mind, pain is not a problem at all. It is like a stimulant, making his emotions more and more excited." That was why Glendale was an evil dragon. An evil dragon with an abnormal mind that only thought about fighting. No one would dare to let it cause trouble. That was why Glendale had long been dismembered and destroyed. However, Glendale didn't seem to care about Drake's words. I already said that it doesn't matter. What's important is to continue the fight. Beat him viciously. That's the most important thing. Are you trying to crush me to pieces? Glendale laughed. Then hurry up and do it. Noah finally understood why Drake hated Glendale so much. It wasn't just because Glendale was a lunatic. It was also because this guy was annoying and troublesome. Thus, Noah's eyes flashed with a sharp light. Do you really want to be smashed to pieces? Then I'll fulfill your wish. The divine power that was circulating in an orderly manner in Noah's body suddenly turned into magic power. Clang! A huge magic formation unfolded in front of Noah. An astonishing amount of magic power surged into the magic formation like a tidal wave, causing it to emit a blinding light. Bang! Like the sound of a cannon, a beam of magic power shot out from the magic formation like an arrow piercing through the night sky, heading straight for Glendale. You're playing this trick again. Bastard! Use your fists. What I want is to kill. Kill! Glendale roared with extreme dissatisfaction. He didn't even try to dodge. Instead, he raised his fist and punched out a punch that could shatter mountains and rivers towards the gigantic magic beam that was shooting towards him. In the next second, the huge beam of magic power and the huge fist collided. However, the collision didn't cause any strange sounds. The instant Glendale's fist came into contact with the magical beam, it was as though it was neatly sliced apart. Lines extended out from it. Whoa! Glendale was shocked. Unfortunately, it was too late for him to be shocked. The beam of magic power landed on Glendale's body and turned into a brilliant white light, enveloping Glendale's entire body. Amidst the radiance, Glendale's gigantic body was sliced apart. Lines extended out and divided into neatly arranged cubes. Bang! A muffled explosion sounded. Just like the declaration just now, Glendale's body shattered into pieces, and his whole body exploded. Fresh blood splattered onto the ground. Chapter 1904. Thud. A huge head fell from the sky with a muffled thud, crashing heavily into an empty field in front of a factory in Chariot Town. Soon after, pieces of neatly arranged flesh fell from the sky along with a large amount of blood, stirring up a thick cloud of dust. Noah slowly descended from the sky and landed on the opposite side of the cloud of dust. He looked ahead, his body still rippling with powerful mana. Raising a hand, Noah slowly opened and closed his palm. As Noah moved, the mana in his hand turned into a dazzling white light, burning slowly like a flame. Noah smiled at the sight. Looks like the reappearance of Shatter has stabilized. There won't be any more problems. Shatter. It was a high-level destructive spell. It was also the mystery that Noah first obtained in his life. After becoming a god-slayer, this spell was fused into Noah's authority, becoming one of the incarnations of Noah's authority. And now, Noah had reappeared it. With mana. The source of a demon's mana was imagination. Only by infusing it with imagined mana would it become a physical power. If one imagined fire, mana would become fire. If one imagined water, mana would become water. If one imagined wind, mana would become wind. If one imagined lightning, mana would become lightning. Demons could only unleash their power through all kinds of imagination, allowing their mana to materialize what they imagined. But that did not mean that they could materialize their power through imagination alone. Otherwise, demons would have become synonymous with having their wishes come true. Putting aside the fact that the more powerful a spell was, the more mana it would need to consume, just imagine whether one could smoothly inject mana, what aspect of mana one was good at, one's talent in mana, and so on. All of these factors would become the foundation of mana exerting its power. For example, Leah's bloodline had the trait of destruction, allowing her to infuse her imagination of destruction into her mana very smoothly, unleashing the power of destruction. Other demons did not have such a bloodline. Even if they could imagine destruction, they would not be able to infuse it into their mana and unleash its destructive power. Saratog did not awaken the power of destruction at all, nor did he have any talent in mana. The mana in his body was pitifully small, or even none at all, and could not use the power of destruction successfully. It was clear that in terms of destruction, it was not just bloodline, but talent was also a decisive factor. Which aspect of mana one was good at would determine the power of their mana. For example, Zhu Nai was most proficient in Thunder Attribute magic power. If he used Thunder Attribute magic power, his power would be extremely strong. Although he could also use other types of magic power, their power was relatively weak and could hardly be of help in battle. It was the same for Label. As the heir of the Phoenix bloodline, her fire mana was infinitely powerful, and she could not use other types of mana apart from fire mana. That was why even though demons' mana could be unleashed with their imagination alone, it did not mean that they could do anything. Some were good at controlling flames. Some were good at controlling lightning. Some were good at controlling water, some were good at controlling wind. In short, apart from factors such as bloodline and talent, if a demon wanted to unleash the power of their mana, whether they could successfully imagine and infuse it into their imagination would determine whether they could use that type of mana. When Noah used his demonic mana, he could successfully conjure wind, fire, thunder, water, and other attributes, but the power was barely satisfactory. As a result, in an experiment, Noah found that when he used his mana to recreate the crush he had used before, the power was incredibly great. In other words, Noah's talent in mana was just like Liatha's destruction, Zhu Nai's lightning, and Label's flames. It was all in the aspect of crush. That was to be expected. The source of mana was imagination. For the user, if something left an indelible impression in their mind, it would naturally be easier to imagine it. And for a person who pursued power, it was clear how deep of an impression the first use of power could leave. Not to mention, Noah had once honed himself in the deep mountains and forests for 4 years in order to learn crush. The impression was even more difficult to erase. Hence, the embodiment of Noah's magic power was completely in the aspect of shattering. However, the power to crush everything was already the same as Liatha's destruction. It belonged to the domain that only demons with special bloodlines could use. Therefore, after the first recreation, Noah could no longer use crush successfully with his demonic mana. In this case, Noah simply added the characteristics of the demon's magic power to his own magic power, just like how he added the characteristics of the power of light to his divine power. He used his magic power to imagine, recreate, and shatter it. As a result, he succeeded in one fell swoop. Perhaps it was also because Noah had used his own mana to cast crush in the past, so he was very clear about how to use it. That was why he was able to succeed. Let divine power have the characteristics of the power of light and be able to be shaped. Let his own mana have the characteristics of the demon's mana and recreate crush. Let the energy in his body have the characteristics of strengthening magic, so that strengthening magic would become eternal. These 3 results were Noah's gains for more than a month. At this point, Noah could reach a 4-digit level just by relying on himself. If he used the forbidden hand of the divine vanquisher or the power of 2 elven devices, he could even stand shoulder to shoulder with the top 10 champions in the world. The gains were not small. Of course, compared to when he had authority, sovereignty, and ability value, he could reach 2 digits in his heyday. This level of gain was nothing. However, if the opponent was a human, the increase in strength, no matter how much, was good. And if the opponent was not a human, with the power of 2 another cosmology, he could completely make up for the lack of authority, sovereignty, and ability value. It did not matter at all. In view of this, Noah's gains were still great. In fact, apart from the above 3 gains, Noah also had another gain in the past month. However, using that power to deal with Glendale was a bit of a fuss. No matter what, this is the end. Noah retracted his mana and glanced at the scene in the dust that was gradually settling down. Looking at the neatly cut pieces of the evil dragon's body into cubes by the power of crush, he smirked. As you wish, I've crushed your bones. I hope you're satisfied. Saying so, Noah was about to turn around and leave, when a burst of disgusting laughter sounded again. You actually did it. Undoubtedly, it's just a human. Not bad. Noah's figure suddenly froze, and he couldn't help but show a stunned expression on his face. In front of him, in the pile of minced meat, Glendale, who only had a head left, acted as if nothing had happened. He vomited blood and laughed loudly. I want to fight again. I want to fight again. But I can't do anything without a body. Forget it. Anyway, as long as my soul is fine, I can always make a new body. I'll fight to my heart's content then. Ha 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 ha. Looking at Glendale's spirited appearance, Noah's expression finally sank. Hey, Drag. Noah said softly. That evil dragon's vitality is so strong that it can survive with only its head left. No, there's no such thing. Drake seemed to be very surprised. Even if it doesn't take the pain seriously, it's already more than that. The previous Glendale didn't have such vitality. Noah's brows furrowed, and his frown deepened. At this moment, a magic circle appeared beside Glendale's shattered body. Inside the magic array, a man in a black robe slowly walked out of the magic array. It was impossible to see his face clearly. The sudden appearance of the black-robed person caused Noah to turn his gaze to the other party, his eyes gradually narrowing. Although he couldn't see the other party's appearance clearly, and the other party's aura was very unfamiliar, Noah felt a magical power from the other party. The magical power of a demon. The black-robed person in front of him was undoubtedly a demon. Chapter 1905. As expected, the black-robed figure slowly walked out of the magic circle and saw Glendale's shattered body. He sighed. I knew it. With such a huge commotion, it must be you who went on a rampage. Hey, you can't blame me for this, Glendale continued to laugh. I just noticed an enemy attack, so I came out to face them. It was obvious that Glendale was in cahoots with the mysterious devil. However, the black-robed man spoke in a tone as if he was talking to himself about something. Don't use that kind of excuse anymore. It's not smart and not convincing at all. After all, you are just an evil dragon with an empty mind. You don't think about anything other than fighting. What's wrong with fighting? Glendale laughed sinisterly. Only the passion of battle can prove that I'm alive. But if you go overboard, it won't do us any good, the black-robed figure said calmly. Our mission is to investigate the God Slayer who is said to be living in this town. That person is the only variable in our plan, so we have to investigate thoroughly. Hearing the black-robed figure's words, Noah's eyes suddenly shone. I see. Are these guys here for me as well? Unfortunately, they didn't seem to know that the person they were investigating was right in front of them. Perhaps the black-robed figure didn't put a human in his eyes and ignored Noah's existence. That was why he was talking to himself without a care in the world. As for Glendale, that guy wouldn't think about anything other than fighting. He probably didn't even think about who Noah was. As long as he could enjoy himself, it didn't matter. With that thought in mind, Noah looked at the black-robed figure and spoke. You are from the disaster squad, right? When Noah spoke, the black-robed figure seemed to have finally noticed Noah's existence. He turned around and looked at Noah with interest. You are the one who turned Glendale into this. You are a human, right? Aren't you going to answer with a question? Noah said with a half-smile. But even if you don't say anything, we can basically guess your identity. It's useless to deny it. Now, other than the disaster squad, no one will come to this town to do anything sneaky. Sorry, we didn't do anything shameful. We just want to say hello to the god slayer in this town, the black-robed figure said. But you're right. Now, all the mythical forces have started to cooperate and reached an agreement to not invade each other, except for the vampires. But the vampires are also considered to be neutral. Only the disaster squad is clearly standing on the opposite side of all the forces. It's not difficult to guess who we are. In other words, the black-robed figure was. What a surprise. Noah laughed in spite of himself. Originally, I thought that after losing the two biggest factions, the Demon King faction and the Hero faction, the group of Calamity would be greatly weakened and wouldn't dare to be so arrogant for a short period of time. I didn't expect that after only a month, you can't wait to take action again. Are you that keen on working as terrorists? Losing the Demon King faction and the Hero faction has indeed caused a serious loss to the Disaster Squad, but if it's just combat power, it can be replenished at any time. The black-robed figure shrugged. Just like the evil dragon you see now, we have successfully resurrected him. Next, we only need to resurrect the evil dragons that have been destroyed in the past one by one. The vacancy of the Demon King faction and the Hero faction can be completely filled. There is no impact at all. How did you do it? Noah stared at the black-robed figure closely. The Disaster Squad already has the technology to resurrect the dead. As long as the soul is still there, it's not difficult to do things like resurrection. Basically, every mythical power has more or less mastered some resurrection techniques. After all, they all have gods. The black-robed man spoke with assurance. However, no matter which faction it is, they can't completely resurrect the dead. For example, the God of the Bible and the 4 old demon kings are examples that can't be resurrected. But we did it, although we are still adjusting it. Hearing that, before Noah could speak, Glendale grumbled in a disgruntled manner. I told you. Don't worry about that kind of thing. Hurry up and make me another body. I want to beat that human up. The evil dragon's body can't be made just because you say so, especially when that is not in my hands. The black-robed figure didn't even look at Glendale and said so. If you want to recover your body, then go back first. I can't wait until then. Glendale shouted, then his eyes that were filled with hostility turned to Noah. If that's the case, even if only my head is left, I want to fight to my heart's content. Let me see if I can crush your throat in this state. Only his head is left, and he still wants to fight. Just like what Drake said, this guy is a complete lunatic. Being entangled by this kind of guy is really disgusting. Give up. The black-robed figure said the same thing. Even when you have a complete body, you can't beat an opponent. With your current state, even if you beat him to death, you can't win. Then let's beat him to death. Glendale said as if it was a matter of fact. That's more satisfying, isn't it? If that's what you want to do, then I won't stop you. The black-robed figure glanced at Glendale, and his tone became cold. But I hope you don't forget that you are still in the adjustment stage. If you continue to mess around, I don't know if you can be resurrected next time. How boring. Glendale was silent for a moment, and then smacked his lips in dissatisfaction. I know. I admit defeat, all right. Then hurry back and change your body. The black-robed figure said decisively. The next battle will be the highlight. With that said, the black-robed man snapped his fingers and a teleportation circle flickered beneath Glendale's head. Hey! That human over there. Glendale glared at Noah fiercely. Don't think that you've won. Even if I'm smashed to pieces, as long as I can still fight, I'll beat you to a pulp sooner or later. Don't die too quickly. The one who can kill you should be me. After saying that, Glendale's body was shrouded by the light from the teleportation circle. Noah quietly watched as Glendale disappeared into the teleportation circle. He didn't make a move, nor did he stop him, which surprised the black-robed figure. "I thought you would stop him. If I can make that disgusting bastard disappear, I don't mind doing so," Noah said indifferently. "But, since you have mastered the technique to resurrect life, even if I stop and kill him, he will be resurrected sooner or later. If that's the case, it doesn't matter if I stop him or not, right?" A very clear judgment. The black-robed figure clapped his hands in praise. As expected of the godslayer that all mythical factions fear. Noah raised an eyebrow. It seemed that the black-robed figure had finally noticed his true identity. However, it wasn't hard to guess. To be able to crush a Dragon King-class evil dragon with a wave of his hand, and to be a human, in this town, only the godslayer could fulfill these conditions. At this moment, the black-robed figure slowly took off his hood. A young man appeared under the hood. A young man with silver hair as pure as moonlight. The young man introduced himself. "I am Euclid Lucifer Gus." Lucifer Gus. Noah was stunned. He seemed to have heard this name somewhere before. Moreover, Noah always felt that he had seen the appearance of the young man who claimed to be Euclid Lucifergus somewhere before. While Noah was still in a daze, the young man Euclid said, "The purpose of coming to this town was to see how powerful you are. But now, it seems that Glendale alone is not enough to test your true strength. However, we will prepare a stage for another battle with you. Let's meet again in the territory of the vampires." After saying that, Euclid returned to the teleportation circle that had been there since the beginning and slowly disappeared on the spot. Looking at Euclid's departure, Noah fell into silence. Chapter 1906. Evil Dragon. In the Paranormal Research Department's office, Asashel looked at Noah, who was sitting opposite him, in shock. The massive calamity actually revived that thing. The battle between Noah and Glendale had alarmed the demons, angels, and fallen angels who stayed behind in Cold King Town. It was only after Euclid and Glendale had left that the Jumanli's kin rushed over. After that, Noah contacted Asashel and had him come here to tell him about the situation. Therefore, apart from Asashel, the Jumanli's kin were also present. "Evil Dragon," Lilith said as if she had a headache. "I didn't expect that a legendary dragon would appear in my territory. This is really unsettling." Glendale, the evil dragon that was destroyed by the famous Norse hero Beowulf. Zhu Nai's expression became troubled. "If we were to face an enemy of that level, I'm afraid we'd be in trouble. In the past, when Glendale was still alive, many heroes were killed by that evil dragon. It was only when Lord Beowulf intervened that the dragon was annihilated," Losvias said. "That's a famous dragon that was recorded in the ancient books of Norse. It was said that it was completely destroyed, and logically speaking, there shouldn't be any possibility of it being revived. It's because it can do that it's scary," Yudu said solemnly. "If the massive calamity can revive a target that was completely destroyed, perhaps the other evil dragons have been revived as well. I heard that among the evil dragons, the most powerful and famous ones are the Celtic Clon Kuvok, the Persian Az Dahaka, and the Hindu Apophis." Rebel's face was filled with unease. Don't tell me that even those evil dragons have been revived. I can't refute that." Kitten lowered her head with a rare solemn expression. "But I didn't sense the presence of any other evil dragon other than Glendale." The Jumanli's kin were able to find Noah immediately because Kitten had sensed the evil dragon's presence. However, Euclid seemed to have made preparations beforehand and set up a barrier around Glendale to prevent the transfer spell from being activated. That was why Kitten could not immediately summon the Jumanli's kin to the scene even though she had sensed the evil dragon's presence in advance. She only arrived after Euclid and Glendale had left. "Are there still that many dangerous dragons?" "They're all dragons that even those who haven't read the Bible are familiar with. Although there are no other mythical dragons in the Bible." Isha, Genova, and Irina hid in a corner and whispered to each other. Their expressions were not as solemn as the others. Only Gasper, who had always been timid, had a look of fear on his face. He was just short of running away. "All right, you don't have to worry so much," Noah said comfortingly. "The resurrection of the evil dragon is no doubt bad news. But even if the sky falls, we'll be here to hold it up. You guys are still young, and it's too early to think about fighting against a Dragon King level evil dragon and a legendary level demonic dragon." "What?" Riaz said rather awkwardly. "Undoubtedly, Master is only a few years older than us. You guys are just looking for trouble if you compare yourself to him." Athasher smiled bitterly. "Among all the mythical influences in the world, those with high authority have lived for at least tens of thousands of years. Even your elder brother, who is a demon lord, is merely a kid who has lived for several thousand years in their eyes. In the end, even those Asura gods and Buddhas are extremely fearful of your teacher. Compared to him, you're just asking for trouble. He is the only exception in the world." However, Noah is right. You guys are just young people who haven't even graduated from high school. You guys belong to the new generation in the demon realm. Although each of you is very outstanding, it's still too early to think about fighting against a Dragon King level existence." Athasher waved his hand. "Every Dragon King level existence is at least comparable to a Demon King. Even I don't have the confidence to win against them. You guys who have participated in the battle against the evil god Loki should know how dangerous it is. If you meet them, you must not fight them. Do you understand?" The Jemengli subordinates looked at each other in dismay before nodding helplessly. Noah and Athasher's expressions relaxed a little. "Compared to the evil dragon, I'm actually more concerned about something else." Athasher stroked his chin. "That Euclid guy told you to see you in the territory of the vampires, right? What does that mean?" "I'm not sure." Noah knocked on the table and narrowed his eyes. "However, it has to be the vampires. I have a bad feeling about this. The vampires were a very ancient race, and had a class system very similar to that of the demons. They were existences that could only live in the darkness, and they valued bloodline and status very much. Just like how there were pure-blooded demon families among the demons, the vampires were also led by nobles. Although the vampires' territory also had a modern lifestyle because they had absorbed many new vampires from the modern era, the nobles with noble bloodlines seemed to have maintained a medieval lifestyle. This was very similar to the demons. The demons had also absorbed many reincarnated demons, and their lifestyle had greatly improved. They had modern high-rise buildings and medieval castles. It was very incredible. The difference was that the demons lived in the underworld, while the vampires lived in a corner of the human world. However, this race had always maintained a certain distance from the other forces. The vampires valued bloodline more than any other race. This race that lived by blood was also more xenophobic than any other force. They were extremely repulsed to come into contact with other non-human beings, and lived according to their own values. They had no intention of coming into contact with other forces at all. To put it nicely, they were conservative. To put it bluntly, they were too arrogant and did not care about the existence of other races. Therefore, even if all the mythical forces in the world had reached an agreement and cooperated with each other, the vampires were still stubbornly sticking to their views, and had no intention of coming into contact with other forces. Perhaps the vampires have their own reasons for this. Athaziel sighed. After all, the vampires have always been in internal strife since hundreds of years ago. It was said that hundreds of years ago, the vampires had a huge rupture. From then on, the vampires were divided into two factions. One was the male Tsepeshi faction. The other was the female Camilla faction. These two factions had always been in conflict since hundreds of years ago, and until now, there had been no conclusion. Could it be that the vampires are already in cahoots with the Disaster Squad? Laybell raised her hand. The vampires have always been stubbornly sticking to their own views and not coming into contact with us. Is it possible that they have already joined forces with the disaster squad? The one who answered this question was none other than Gasper. I don't think that's possible, Gasper mustered up his courage and said. The vampires value bloodline very much, and even mixed bloods will be looked down upon by them. The disaster squad has humans, demons, fallen angels, and all kinds of other races. With the vampires' values, it's impossible to come into contact with them. These words, coming from Gasper, who was both a vampire and a mixed blood, was undoubtedly very convincing. I don't think the vampires have joined forces with the disaster squad either, Leah said. If that's the case, the vampires will try to come into contact with us. If they can get on this side, it will undoubtedly be more beneficial for the disaster squad, right? That would be the so-called traitor. Noah had also considered these questions. It's just that I have a feeling that things are not as simple as we think. Noah shook his head. No matter what, Athaziel, I think we need to go to the vampire's territory in advance. Asashel nodded his head heavily. At this time, a communication magic circle opened up beside Athaziel's ear. After a while, Athaziel stood up in surprise. The vampires plan to talk to us. Athaziel's words stunned everyone, including Noah. Chapter 1907. The next day, as usual, Noah lived his life as a teacher in the Cold King Academy. After school, he brought the Jimmins into the training space for special training as usual. He only brought Orpheus back to the apartment after dark. When it was late at night, Noah asked Aster and Athena to accompany Orpheus while he went out and returned to the school. He went to the Supernatural Research Department's office. Every member of the Jumanli family was present. Asashel was also present. Except for Laius and Asashel, who were sitting on the sofa in the office, everyone else stood behind the sofa. The atmosphere in the air was somewhat heavy. The people present did not talk as unbridled as before. Instead, it was as if they deliberately lowered their voices and whispered to each other. Even Laius and Asashel were affected by the atmosphere and did not speak. They just sat there with their eyes closed, as if waiting for something. In such an atmosphere, Noah's arrival seemed to have broken the silence and attracted everyone's attention. No one spoke. However, Noah's arrival clearly eased everyone's expression a little. Okay. Asashel finally spoke. Since even the God-Slayer is here, no matter what the vampire's purpose is, they won't be able to cause any trouble in front of this guy, right? Yesterday, the vampires, who had been showing a clear refusal to the other forces, suddenly contacted the demons, angels, and fallen angels, indicating that they wanted to have a meeting. Moreover, the target was not any of the leaders of the demons, angels, and fallen angels, but Laius. This matter caused great confusion and doubt to the demons, angels, and fallen angels, and it also shocked the Jimmins. Although Laius was the next leader of the Jimmins were at best just one of the pure-blooded demon families in the demon realm. Their status was not high enough to represent the demon realm to talk to the other forces. Under such circumstances, it was really inconceivable that the vampires, who had been refusing contact before, suddenly wanted to have a meeting with Laius. Moreover, the vampires did not seem to be targeting the Jimmins, but Laius herself. Therefore, there was no doubt that this meeting definitely contained information that others were unaware of. In this regard, the demons, angels, and fallen angels even held a meeting and finally decided to accept the talks with the vampires. Still, it was worrying to have only Leah's and the Zumonli's kin talk to the vampires. Thus, Asashel volunteered to participate in this discussion as the guardian representative of the Zumonli family. Noah, on the other hand, was a witness to the negotiations. Naturally, he had a legitimate reason to stay. As for the time of the meeting, the vampires expressed that the sooner the better, and directly set it for the next night. The location was none other than the Supernatural Research Society of the Cold King Academy. Listen up, little ones. Noah's eyes fell on the Jumanli's kin who were standing behind Laius as he instructed them. Later on, no matter what the other party says, none of you are allowed to interrupt, in case the other party makes use of you or has something that can be used against you. Do you understand? The group of Jimenez nodded in agreement. Only Gasper had a complicated expression on his face. Vampires were a race that placed great emphasis on bloodlines and viewed humans as prey and bait. For vampires who valued bloodlines, mixed bloods were naturally the most lowly existences. One could only imagine what kind of treatment Gasper had suffered in the past. Lias had secretly told Noah that Gasper had escaped from the vampire's territory and was unfortunately discovered by the church's exorcist, who almost killed him. Lias, who had discovered Gasper, used a demonic pawn when Gasper was on the verge of death and reincarnated him into a demon, making him one of her own kin. This timid and slender young man had lived quite a hard life in the past. And all of this was thanks to the vampires. That was why Gasper was so resistant to going to the vampire's territory. Now, under unexpected circumstances, he had to meet the person in charge of the vampires face to face. It was not hard to imagine how Gasper's mood was. To be honest, it was not an exaggeration to say that the vampire's values were the worst in the eyes of humans and kind-hearted people. Noah also did not have any good feelings about this race. However, Noah would not point fingers at other people's lifestyles. That was just putting his values into other people's values. Therefore, Noah only said this to Gasper. If you want to leave, it's not too late. That one sentence made everyone look at Gasper. Gasper, Leah said gently. Don't force yourself, it's okay. It's okay. Gasper shook his head and mustered his courage. Compared to hiding in the room alone, I'd rather be with everyone, even if we're facing vampires. This wasn't unreasonable. Then you can watch from the side. Noah nodded. Maybe the other party will choose to meet with Lias, and it might have something to do with you. After leaving such a seemingly persuasive sentence, Noah sat down beside Lias. After all, the other party asked to talk to Lias. Therefore, Noah and Asashel both sat beside Lias as people related to her. Until a certain moment, a strange feeling began to spread throughout the entire space, and everyone's spirits were lifted. Here it comes. Lias subconsciously wanted to stand up. However, Noah and Asashel pressed Lia's shoulder at the same time. Don't overreact. Asashel patted Lia's shoulder. It's just the beginning. You're the main person of the meeting, there's no reason for you to stand up and greet him. Noah pursed his lips and turned his gaze to Yudu. Yudu, go and greet the guest. Understood. Yudu nodded and immediately walked out of the office. The atmosphere in the office became even more tense. Not long after, there was a knock on the door. Yudu opened the door with impeccable etiquette and allowed the guest to slowly walk in from outside. Everyone's eyes were immediately attracted to the guest. It was because the person who came in was too eye-catching. It was a young girl wearing a medieval princess dress. The girl had a delicate face and wavy blonde hair. Her figure was petite, and her eyes were as red as blood. She looked like a delicate puppet, giving off an unusual sense of beauty. Rather than saying that his skin was white, it would be more accurate to say that it was pale. She looked to be about 16 or 17 years old, about the same age as the Jimenez's family. Behind the girl, there was a man and a woman. The man and woman seemed to be just followers, but their skin was also terrifyingly pale, just like the dead, and their bodies were fluctuating with an indescribable sense of coldness. They were pure-blooded vampires. Compared to Gasper, who felt human, they seemed to be a race that did not fit in with humans. The leading vampire girl took a step forward, lifted the hem of her dress, and bowed like a noble. I'm Elmaine Shelton Gerstein, you can call me Elmaine. The vampire girl's voice was very pleasing to the ears, and her tone was quite polite, but it made everyone present feel a sense of superiority. That kind of feeling, although not to the extent of causing disgust, made people subconsciously think that the visitor was not friendly. Gerstein. Asashel stroked his chin. I remember, he seems to be the highest noble in the Camilla faction, one of the two major vampire clans, right? In other words, he was the noblest pure-blooded descendant of the vampires, other than the Opesh and Camilla factions. Liaz nodded and turned her gaze to Elmaine. Although there are many things I want to ask, before that, please have a seat. Elmaine nodded and sat down opposite Liaz. Chapter 1908. Before we start the meeting, there is one thing I want to ask first. It's related to whether the next topic can be carried out smoothly. As soon as he sat down, Elmaine Schursting immediately spoke. Moreover, as soon as he opened his mouth, everyone was taken aback. Someone among us vampires has become the host of the Divine Annihilation Tool. Do you already know this news? What? Asashers was the first to react and almost stood up in surprise. A vampire has become the host of the Divine Annihilation Tool. It seems that you haven't received the news yet. Elmaine Schursting seemed to have confirmed this matter and said to himself. However, that's not surprising. Recently, you have been focusing on the peace talks between the major forces and haven't received any information from us. Hearing that, Asashers put away his shocked expression and faintly showed some regret. Indeed, recently, Asashers has been busy with the peace talks between the major forces and relaxed a lot about the vampires. Asashers was prepared to go to the vampires' territory again after the event. He didn't expect that with this relaxation, he didn't even get such important information. If it was Noah, he would also feel very annoyed, right? However, after a while, Asashers took a deep breath and calmly spoke. Did the vampire get the Sephiroth's cup or the Telos Karma? There were a total of 13 types of divine annihilation tools. According to the ranking, the 13 types of divine annihilation tools, from high to low, were True Longinus, Brilliant Thunder Prison, Zenith Tempest, Annihilation Maker, Dimension Lost, Sephiroth's Cup, Red Dragon Emperor's Boosted Gear, White Dragon Emperor's Light Wings, Divine Dividing, Lion King's Battle Axe, Regulus Nemia, Innovation Clear, Eternal Ice Maiden, Absolute Damage, Incinerate Anthem of the Purple Flame Sacrificial Lord, Black Blade's Dog God, Canis Lycaon, Telos Karma. At this time, when all the major powers had reached an agreement, the whereabouts of 10 types of god extermination tools had been confirmed. The demons had the Lion King's Axe, Regulus Nemia. The angels had the Brilliant Thunder Prison, Zenith Tempest. The fallen angels had the Black Blade Canis Lycaon. On the human side, there was a magic association that had the Absolute Damage. The captured heroes had True Longinus, Annihilation Maker, and Dimension Lost. In a group of magicians that kept a distance from the three major forces of demons, angels, and fallen angels and was regarded as dangerous and lawless by many magicians, there was the Incinerate Anthem of the Purple Flame Ritual Master. As for the Red Dragon Emperor's Boosted Gear and White Dragon Emperor's Light Wings, Divine Dividing, these two god extermination tools were in the hands of Noah and Wally, respectively. As for the remaining Sephiroth's Cup, Innovate Clear, and Telos Karma, their whereabouts were still unknown. Their whereabouts had yet to be confirmed. It was said that the current demon king Beelzebub, Achuka, who was also a surpasser like Sazax, seemed to have obtained the Innovation Clear and was researching it. However, whether this news was true or false had not been confirmed. As for the Sephiroth's Cup and the Telos Karma, there wasn't even the slightest bit of information about them. If the vampires had a God's End relic, then it could only be one of the Sephiroth's Cup and the Telos Karma. Thus, Elmaine Shelton also answered. The god extermination tool in the possession of the vampires is Sephiroth's Cup. Sephiroth's Cup. Just as the True Longinus referred to the famous Lance of Longinus, the Sephiroth's Cup referred to the famous Holy Grail. Really? Asashel couldn't help but mutter. The legendary holy relic actually fell into the hands of the vampires? We also think that this is a joke. After all, we have always been enemies with the church, Shelton said self-deprecatingly. As vampires, they actually went after the church's holy relic. This is the biggest joke. It wasn't just Shelton. Even Aisha, Genova, and Irina, the 3 former members of the church, had a complicated expression. In response, Asashel only said this. Since the vampires didn't give up on this holy relic and still keep it, then it proves that you want to use its power, right? Please don't joke around, okay? Shelton said with some disgust as if he was insulted. The Camilla faction is a noble clan of vampires. They would never pursue that kind of holy relic. It's not the Camilla faction that keeps the Sephiroth's cup, but the Zepesh faction. The Zepesh faction. Everyone looked at each other. Lyeth couldn't help but speak up. Since it's the Zepesh faction that owns the Sephiroth's cup, as members of the Camilla faction, why are you here? Our purpose is simple. Shelton looked up and turned to Gasper, who was behind Lyeth. In order to resist the power of the Zepesh faction that has obtained the divine relic, we, the Camilla faction, need a countermeasure, and that is Gasper Verratti. Ha! Gasper was stunned on the spot. The Jumanli's kin were also shocked. In other words, Asashel asked with an uncertain tone. You want to use Gasper's power to deal with the Zepesh faction? That's right. Shelton nodded. That's the purpose of our trip. No way. Lyeth rejected without even thinking about it. Gasper's divine relic is powerful, but it can't compare to the divine relic. You're sending Gasper to his death. However, Lyeth's words made Shelton frown deeply. What's wrong? Shelton couldn't help but blurt out. Don't you know the true power hidden in that mixed blood's body? The true power hidden in Gasper's body. Everyone was stunned. On the side, Noah's eyes flickered slightly. Chapter 1909. Everyone could understand Shelton's thoughts. The so-called God's extermination tool was just like its literal meaning. It was a tool that could exterminate even gods. Although having a divine annihilation tool did not mean that one could kill a god, at least, with a divine annihilation tool, there was a slight possibility of killing a god. It was the same even if the user was a human. Cao Cao was the best example. The hero's descendant was very capable, and his comprehensive strength had even reached a 4-digit level. Even Noah had to use the divine annihilation tool before he gained a few gains over the past month and improved his strength greatly. Wally even forced Tyrannosaurus out. However, without the Holy Spear, no matter how capable Cao Cao was, he would be at the bottom of the 5-digit level at best, or even less than that. It was because of the Holy Spear that Cao Cao became the strongest human in this world, leading all the hero's descendants and heroes' descendants. His strength and means were not weak. Of course, to be able to fully unleash the power of the Holy Spear and even develop 7 different subtypes of Divine Annihilation tool, it was clear that Cao Cao himself also had extraordinary abilities. However, it was because of this that the power of the strongest Divine Annihilation tool was fully revealed, making people more aware of how unfair the Divine Annihilation tool was. The vampires began to have internal strife hundreds of years ago and had been in a stalemate. The 2 factions, Zepesh and Camilla, had never been able to determine a winner. Even if there was a difference in strength between them, there was definitely not much difference. However, the appearance of the Divine Annihilation tool could completely destroy this balance. With the power of the Divine Annihilation tool, the Zepesh faction could definitely defeat the Camilla faction and gain true control of the vampire's world. Understanding this, the Camilla faction naturally had to think of ways to deal with the Divine Annihilation tool that destroyed the balance. That was why the Camilla faction took the initiative to propose a meeting. The reason why the target of the meeting was Lyeth was also very simple. It was because they wanted to use the power of Lyath's kin, Gasper, who was once persecuted by the vampires, to deal with the Holy Grail. However, just like what Lyath said, although Gasper's divine artifact was very powerful, it was not to the point where it could rival the divine annihilation tool. Not to mention, the Holy Grail was ranked 5th among the gods' destruction artifacts. It was only below the top 4 gods' destruction artifacts. The Camilla faction was naturally aware of this. But Elmine Shelton still came for Gasper. The reason was because there was some kind of power hidden in Gasper's body. Not to mention the others, even Gasper himself didn't know about this matter. Because Gasper had long since been in a state of panic. My body has a hidden power. Gasper was at a loss. That kind of thing, how is that possible? Everyone, including Lias who was Gasper's master, was at a loss. Seeing this, Elmine Shelton's crimson eyes flashed, and there was some pity in his eyes when he looked at Lias. So that's how it is. You don't know the truth about Gasper Verdi. If you knew, you wouldn't have accepted such a servant, right? What do you mean by that? Lias was getting a little angry. No matter what kind of power is hidden in Gasper's body, he is still my kin. I will never look down on him because of the so-called truth. Is that so? Elmine Shelton nodded a little dismissively. If that's the case, then let us return to the main topic. I still say the same thing, please lend Gasper Verdi to us. We need his power to deal with the Saipesh faction. His tone was as if he was not talking about a person, but an item. To Elmine Shelton, or the entire Camilla faction, what they were interested in was Gasper's hidden power, not Gasper himself. Understanding this point, everyone's face darkened. At this time, Elmine Shelton spoke again. Of course, we didn't come empty-handed. Elmine Shelton took a document from the vampire guard beside him, put it on the table, and pushed it in front of a satchel. Governor of the Fallen Angels, please take a look. Aesishers frowned slightly and took the document. After glancing through it a few times, his expression began to turn ugly. I see. For the first time, Asashel looked at Elmine Shelton with an extremely unhappy gaze. The peace agreement on the Camilla side. Are you going to use this in exchange for us to hand over Gasper? What? Everyone was taken aback. Peace agreement. Taking out a peace agreement in this situation. This was simply telling everyone that if Gasper was not handed over to the Camilla faction, then the vampires would not conclude a peace agreement. As we all know, you are now issuing peace agreements to all forces equally for the peace of the world. In the past, you have contacted the vampires more than once, but at that time, we were too busy to respond. Elmine Shelton covered the corners of his mouth and said with a dignified and polite smile. Now, Her Highness the Queen of the Camilla faction has decided to accept everyone's peace agreement and show the greatest goodwill. If you don't respond to this agreement, then we'll take it that you refuse to join us vampires. In the future, we will no longer open our doors for you. Originally, when all the mythical forces except the vampires had concluded a peace agreement, Asashel could force the vampires to abdicate and let them sit at the negotiating table. After all, the other forces had concluded a peace agreement, but the vampires intended to act alone. In that case, they could force the vampires to abdicate by saying that they were disrupting the peace. If the vampires did not have the idea of disrupting the peace, then why not conclude a peace agreement? And if the vampires had the idea of disrupting the peace, then all the forces would have a good reason to act. They could degrade the vampires to terrorists like the Disaster Squad and intervene by force. In the face of all the mythical forces in the world, how could a small force of vampires resist? Therefore, the final result was that the vampires had no choice but to sit at the negotiating table no matter how much they rejected contact with the other forces. In the end, when Elmine Shelton used this move, the situation was completely different. If Lias and Asashel refused to hand Gasper over to the Camilla faction, then the Camilla faction would treat it as a failure of the negotiations and announce to the world that they wanted to conclude a peace agreement, but were rejected. In this way, from now on, the extremely xenophobic vampires would be able to justifiably stop contacting the other forces, and the other forces would no longer have a reason to target this point and force the vampires to conclude a peace agreement. That was why Asashel's expression was so ugly when he understood that Elmine Shelton was playing the diplomatic card. In other words, he was using a servant of the next head of the Gimli family in exchange for the peace agreement of the entire Camilla faction. Lias could not refuse. Because if she refused, in the eyes of the other forces, it would be seen as the demons taking the initiative to screw up the peace agreement with the vampires. The result would be that all the other forces would be dissatisfied, and the demons' credibility would plummet. If the entire demon world was harmed for a servant, then not to mention Lias and the Gimli family, even Sazak's, the demon king's right to speak would be severely reduced, and he would be firmly crushed by the others in terms of political power. Lias, who understood the danger, began to tremble. That was caused by the anger in her heart. The conflict between vampires only needs to be resolved by the vampires themselves. That's enough. Elmine Shelton showed a victorious smile. So, all you need to do is lend Gasper Virati to us, and there will be no more requests. We vampires do not need the intervention of outsiders. Undoubtedly, they had already proposed a peace agreement, and yet they still spoke as if they were against life forms other than vampires. This made everyone's hearts begin to burn with anger. These people were not sincere at all. Just when everyone was angry but didn't dare to say anything, Noah, who had been listening quietly at the side, let out a sigh, attracting everyone's attention. Then, Noah spoke for the first time since the beginning of the meeting. Lias, Noah said very calmly. Refuse. Chapter 1910. When Noah's voice spread throughout the Paranormal Research Department's office, everyone suddenly fell silent. Lias, Asashel, and the Jamonli's kin were all stunned on the spot. The victorious smile on Elmine Shelton's face suddenly froze. As if he had only just realized Noah's existence, Elmine Shelton's pair of red eyes turned to Noah. After sizing up Noah, he was surprised. Human. Elmine Shelton seemed to have thought of something. You are the god-slayer that all the mythical factions fear. In such an occasion, I hope you notice my other identity. Noah met Elmine Shelton's gaze and said very casually. I am the witness of the peace agreement between the factions. Since the Camilla faction has handed over the peace agreement at this time, then I should be able to speak, right? Since the famous godslayer has said so, we naturally can't refuse. Elmine Shelton's tone was very stiff, and his gaze towards Noah was a little angry. However, your words just now, sir, can I take it that you have refused to conclude the peace agreement with us, the Camilla faction? Isn't that a matter of course? Noah said without hesitation. The so-called peace agreement is ultimately for world peace. Who needs to be sacrificed to get peace? That kind of peace, it's better not to have. With one sentence, the haze and hesitation in the hearts of Lias, Asashel, and the Jamonli's kin were completely blown away. Well said. Teacher. Lias could not help but say. Who needs to be sacrificed to get peace? That kind of peace is definitely not what everyone wants to see. I have to say, I am also old and muddle-headed. Asashel laughed self-deprecatingly and threw the document in his hand directly on the table. You don't even understand such a simple principle, and even have hesitation. You have lived for so many years in vain. You. Elmine Shelton was startled and couldn't believe what he was seeing. Are you really going to refuse the peace agreement of the vampires for a mere servant? Are you crazy? You're the one who's crazy, not us. Noah looked at Elmine Shelton and said without a hint of confusion. Life is a priceless treasure. There is no difference between high and low, and there is no possibility of its value being reduced because of the quantity. Using a life to weigh the weight of an agreement is wrong in itself. Since I am the witness of the negotiation, I will not allow it to go on. The way Elmaine Shelton looked at Noah had completely changed. It became extremely inconceivable. It wasn't because Elmaine Shelton had been convinced by Noah's theory. On the contrary, Elmaine Shelton only felt that Noah's brain was broken. On the other side was a demon servant. On the other hand, the Camilla faction had joined. Everyone knew which side was more important, right? How dare he use the saying that life is a priceless treasure to make up the numbers? That kind of guy whose bloodline wasn't even pure, what kind of value would he have? Noah's voice was extremely abrupt, and it entered Elmaine Shelton's ears and pierced her heart. You must think so, right? Elmaine Shelton, whose thoughts were directly guessed, widened her eyes. Seeing this, Noah sneered. I say, Miss Vampire, personally, I really hate you vampires who treat bloodline as everything and take pride in your values. But I'm a human, and I don't have the right to use my values to criticize other people's values. But because of this, I need to remind you that since I didn't use my values to criticize you, then please don't use your self-righteous values to measure how much we value something. Noah glanced at Elmaine Shelton, whose expression changed slightly. In your eyes, it's just a mixed-blood bastard, but in our eyes, it's an irreplaceable companion. Do you think you can win by playing the diplomatic card? If that's the case, as a witness to the negotiation, I'll tell you my thoughts. Noah glanced around at everyone present and said in an unquestionable tone. I don't agree with this negotiation, and I suggest rejecting the negotiation with the Camilla faction. You. Elmaine Shelton's delicate face was replaced by anger. The situation that originally leaned towards the Camilla faction was directly declared to have collapsed because of Noah's words. This is your decision. Elmaine Shelton took a deep breath, suppressed the anger in her heart, and looked at Lise and Asashel. If you reject our negotiation, you won't get the vampires to join us in the future. Elmaine Shelton's words made both Lise and Asashel hesitate. There was no way not to hesitate. Although Noah's words were very much in line with Lise and Asashel's thoughts, the agreement with the vampires was also extremely important. If the negotiation here broke down, there would be no chance to conclude a peace negotiation with the vampires in the future. In this way, as mentioned before, Lise and Asashel, who caused the negotiation to break down, would have to bear the responsibility, causing the demons and fallen angels to be condemned by all the other forces, resulting in a series of consequences. Therefore, Lise and Asashel still had to hesitate. However, at this time, Noah curled his lips and smiled. Who said we can't get the vampires to join us? Isn't there still the Sypesh faction? What? Elmaine Shelton was stunned at first, but then she immediately understood, and her expression finally changed drastically. Are you going to conclude a peace negotiation with the Sypesh faction? Since the Camilla faction is using such an attitude to negotiate with us, haven't you considered that this will push us to another faction in the vampire world? Noah looked at Elmaine Shelton and said with a faint smile. Since the Sypesh faction has caused you to be in danger with a Divine Destroyer relic, then with our help, the Camilla faction will probably be finished. When the time comes, we will conclude a peace negotiation with the Sypesh faction and also obtain the Vampires' Alliance. There won't be any problems, right? You. Elmaine Shelton lost her elegance for the first time. Her hand was trembling as she pointed at Noah, and her frighteningly white face was full of anger. You actually want to reconcile with a faction that has abandoned the dignity of the vampires to pursue the holy relic? Looking at you, you really didn't think of this. Noah sneered. That's true. In your opinion, no one would choose to be with a person who is willing to degenerate. But as I said just now, that's your value. To you, the Sypesh faction who is actually pursuing the holy relic is a group of lowly and degenerate people as residents of the dark side. But in our opinion, it's inconceivable that the dignity of the vampires is restricted to this aspect. Noah was extremely sarcastic. Of course, whether or not to conclude a peace negotiation with the Saipesh faction will have to wait until we sit down and have a good talk with them. As for you, go back and change your attitude, think about how to show your sincerity, and then come to us in the future. With that, Noah stood up directly, as if he had lost interest in Elmaine Shelton, and spoke to Yudu on the side. Yudu, send the insincere guest away. Elmaine Shelton stood up as if she couldn't bear it anymore, and a strong aura fluctuated all over her body. The two followers behind Elmaine Shelton also took a step forward with a furious expression, and their bodies trembled with visible coldness. However, that intimidating aura and coldness all collapsed and disappeared completely under Noah's casual gaze. With Elmaine Shelton taking the lead, the three vampires all took a step back. Tomorrow, we will go to the vampires' territory and make a trip to the Saipesh faction, Noah said calmly. You just have to pray that the Saipesh faction is the same as you and not to our liking. Otherwise, the Camilla faction won't exist in the vampire world for too long. The meeting thus ended with Noah's strong performance. Chapter 1911. Elmaine Shelton left with his two guards in a dejected manner. It was not until Elmaine Scherzinger left that the tense atmosphere in the Supernatural Research Department's office relaxed. Then, the group of Jumanli's followers cast admiring gazes at Noah. Teacher is amazing. Irina's eyes sparkled as she exclaimed excitedly. In just 2 or 3 moves, those annoying vampires were all defeated and fled. Those vampires are really annoying, Kitten said in a low voice. They're too self-righteous, everyone nodded. Noah's strength, for the Jumanli's followers, greatly helped them vent their anger. They all felt that their thoughts were a lot clearer. Unfortunately, this way, the Camilla faction's path is completely blocked. Athasher sighed. Although it was very satisfying to be so strong just now, there are many consequences. Next, if even the negotiations with the Opesh faction break down, then the vampires' alliance will really become impossible. This was undoubtedly very disadvantageous. However, Elmaine Scherzinger did not seem to have thought of this, so he was completely suppressed by Noah. However, since Noah chose to be strong, it proved that he had some confidence in his heart. At least, for Noah, since the vampires were in internal strife, there were as many loopholes as he wanted to take advantage of. It was not difficult to achieve his goal at all. Compared to that, what kind of power does the Holy Grail have? Noah said. I'm more concerned about this aspect. Hearing this, Athasher gave a direct answer. The power of the Holy Grail can subvert the common sense of life. Subvert the common sense of life. Noah was startled. That's right. Athasher nodded. Take vampires for example. Even ordinary people know their weaknesses. If they are stabbed in the heart by a wooden stake, they will die. If they are stabbed by a cross, they will die. If they are exposed to sunlight, and if they are hit by a silver weapon, they will be seriously injured. And the purer the bloodline, the more obvious these weaknesses are. Don't demons also have weaknesses of light and holiness? To demons, light was a deadly poison. Therefore, if the light power of angels and fallen angels hit a demon's body, it would definitely cause irreparable injuries or even death. As for the weakness of the divine attribute, that was even more obvious. For example, if a holy sword was struck by a weapon that specifically countered creatures of darkness and demonic nature, even its existence itself could be obliterated. That's a flaw that all living things are destined to have. Even gods have weaknesses. It's easier to understand if you say that it's a characteristic of life. Asashel narrowed his eyes. However, if the Holy Grail is used, using the power of the Holy Grail that can overturn the common sense of life, such weaknesses will be completely erased, and they will become a creature without any flaws. The Tsapishi faction probably wanted to use this power to become a flawless creature, right? However, in the eyes of the other vampires who were extremely concerned about their bloodlines, such behavior was simply negating everything about their bloodlines. Wouldn't it be a denial of the vampire's way of life if he were to modify himself at will? Therefore, to the Camilla faction who thought highly of themselves, the Tsupishi faction was a group of depraved people. It was not surprising that they felt that their existence was an insult to all vampires. This was the reason why Elmain-Shurstin was so disgusted with the Tsupishi faction. However, everyone was more afraid of the power of the Holy Grail. A divine relic that overturns the common sense of life. Genova muttered. As expected of the holy relic that was once used to contain the blood of Jesus, although it was not like the Holy Grail of the Shade Moon world that could become a wish machine, in the category of manipulating life, the Holy Grail of this world could be said to be almost omnipotent. It said that if the power of the Holy Grail is used to the extreme, one can even obtain an eternal body. Even if the dead soul is resurrected, that's. Asashel said, but halfway through his sentence, he suddenly froze. It was as if he had been struck by lightning and remembered something extremely important. His eyes widened. Following that, Asashel could not help but mutter. Resurrection of the dead, vampires, evil dragons. This sentence caused Noah's eyes to flash. He suddenly raised his head and met Asashel's gaze. The group of Jimenez's followers were not fools. They immediately understood what Noah and Asashel were thinking of. The evil dragon. The evil dragon that was resurrected by the disaster squad. The evil dragon that should have been completely destroyed was actually resurrected. Did this not seem like the common sense of life had been overturned? In other words, the resurrection of the evil dragon was most likely due to the power of the Holy Grail. Now, the mystery is solved. Noah was speechless. No wonder that fellow called Euclid said to meet again in the territory of the vampires. So, the vampires have really joined forces with the disaster squad. Everyone was speechless. Since the evil dragon was resurrected, it proved that the Holy Grail that fell into the hands of the Saipesh faction was indeed used by the disaster squad. There was no room for objection. Moreover, the Saipesh faction was already using the Holy Grail to perfect their own lives. They had done something that the Camilla faction saw as tarnishing their own bloodline. So, they would not be as proud of their bloodline as everyone had guessed, and not contact the disaster squad, right? In other words, even if the Saipesh faction did not join the disaster squad, they were definitely in cahoots with the disaster squad. We're in big trouble now. Asashel's eyebrows were tightly furrowed. It seems that this trip to the vampires' territory will not only involve us in the conflict between the Saipesh faction and the Camilla faction, but also clash with the disaster squad. And our previous plan is completely ruined. Lyeth was also frustrated. If the Saipesh faction is really in cahoots with the disaster squad, then there's no way we can reach a peace agreement with the Saipesh vampires. And the negotiations with the Camilla faction have already broken down. Junai said worriedly. It seems that the peace agreement with the vampires is really not going to happen. The atmosphere began to become heavy. However, Noah chuckled and dispelled the heavy atmosphere in one fell swoop. No, this is actually more beneficial to us. Noah looked at Asashel. If the Saipesh faction is really in cahoots with the disaster squad, then even if they are harboring criminals wanted by all forces, we have the right to intervene, right? Asashel. We have the right. Asashel also showed a smirk. As long as we can intervene and break the vampires' insistence of not contacting the outside world for many years, then the values of the inhabitants of the vampire world will definitely be impacted. By then, even if they are unwilling, the vampires will have to sit down with us and have a talk. As long as there was a chance to talk, the vampires were destined to be at a disadvantage under the pressure of all the mythical forces in the world. By then, they could bring up the matter of hiding the terrorists of the disaster squad. In order to avoid being treated as an accomplice of the disaster squad, the vampires could only raise their hands and surrender, obediently signing the peace agreement. The only thing left is the lack of evidence. Noah snapped his fingers. Asashel, the original plan remains unchanged. We will go to the vampires' territory tomorrow. If the disaster squad appears there, then the evidence is conclusive and no one can doubt it. But then, the possibility of conflict with the disaster squad and the Saipesh faction at the same time is also very high. Asashel stroked his chin and suddenly smiled as if he thought of something. Looks like I have to find a few reliable guards to go with me. Let's go together. Liaz pressed on Gasper's shoulder with a determined look on her face. What kind of power is hidden in Gasper's body? I am very concerned about this, and I have to find out. Me too. Although Gasper was very hesitant, he also had a determined look on his face. I don't want to be seen as a strange thing. If there is really some strange power in my body, at least I have to find out about it. Is that so? Noah looked at Liaz and Gasper, then looked at the Jumanli's kin and nodded. In that case, you will be my guards and come with me. Yes. Teacher. The Jumanli's kin answered in unison. Just like that, the plan to go to the vampires' territory was put on the agenda. Chapter 1912. The nation of vampires was not a particularly big secret to the people of the inner world. That was because it was in the human world. Moreover, it was deep in the mountains of Romania. Usually, the surroundings of that deep mountain would be covered by a very high-level barrier. That barrier not only had the function of blocking incoming enemies but also had the function of concealment and interception. Concealment naturally referred to the concealment of the scenery within the territory. Outsiders would only see a dense mountain and not a nation of vampires. Interception referred to methods such as blocking teleportation magic that could directly enter the territory of vampires. Therefore, if one wanted to enter the nation of vampires, they would either have to register in the nation of vampires so that they could directly use teleportation magic to enter in the future, or they could only go on foot. In view of this, everyone needed to first fly to Europe through multiple teleportation magic before heading to the vampire territory in Romania. Of course, that did not mean that everyone would really have to walk over. It was just that they could not perform instant teleportation. Therefore, Asashel had already prepared a variety of means of transportation over there. There were not only vehicles but also planes. They were quite well prepared. As for the travel expenses, there was no need to worry at all. Not to mention that Asashel was the governor of the fallen angels and had the support of an entire force behind him. Even Liaz was the next master of the Gimli family and was extremely wealthy. There was no need to worry about such things at all. Therefore, everyone only prepared some luggage before dawn. After dawn, under the lead of Noah and Asashel, they entered the teleportation magic formation and teleported to Europe in one go. Then, they boarded a plane and headed to Romania. After arriving at their destination, everyone changed to vehicles and drove into the mountain road to head to the vampire territory. Due to the large number of people, there were a total of 10 Gimli family members. In addition to Noah and Asashel, there were a total of 12 people. One vehicle was naturally not enough. The preparation of the vehicles was not a problem. Even though they were in a hurry, Asashel still prepared 2 vehicles. Junai, Genova, Irina, Gasper, and Losvias shared a vehicle, and the driver was Yudu. Noah, Liaz, Aisha, Kitten, and Label shared a vehicle, and the driver was Asashel. Mountain roads were always difficult to advance. Along the way, everyone was in a bumpy ride. After a full hour of bumpy ride, they had only covered less than half of the journey. The surroundings were filled with thick fog. If it was an ordinary person, not to mention driving, even if they walked, they wouldn't dare to rush through such a dense fog, right? Otherwise, once they got lost in such a deep mountain, it would be almost fatal. Not to mention, if something went wrong and he fell off the cliff under the influence of the fog, he might even lose his life. However, Asashel continued to drive with ease, as though the fog had no effect on him at all. He continued to drive forward. Noah, who was sitting in the passenger seat, glanced at the rearview mirror. In the back seats, Lyeth, Aisha, Kitten, and Label were all fast asleep. Listening to the orderly breathing of the girls, Noah suddenly spoke. "Have Vale and the others arrived?" His words made Athashel's hands tremble, and he almost drove off the cliff. "You?" Asashel uttered in shock and helplessness. "Have you already guessed it?" "I guessed it a long time ago." Noah pursed his lips. "Since you said you wanted to find a few reliable guards, but didn't let them move with us, who else could it be other than the shameful Vale and his teammates?" Vale's situation wasn't very good. Because he took Orpheus away without permission, Vale was regarded as a traitor by the Disaster Syndicate, and was currently wanted by the Disaster Syndicate. Vale and his group were former terrorists, and were also wanted by the major mythical organizations. Under such circumstances, Vale and his group were like rats crossing the street, and everyone wanted to beat them up. If they didn't live in hiding, how could they avoid the arrest of the two factions? However, Vale shouldn't think that there was anything wrong with this situation, right? After all, being wanted by all the mythical organizations and all the terrorists at the same time, and there was an endless stream of people chasing after them, it would definitely greatly satisfy that battle maniac. It was just that Vale himself was very satisfied, but whether Athashel would continue to look at it like this was another matter. After all, he was raised by you from a young age. He is equivalent to your son. Noah said with a smile. If possible, you must try your best to lead Wally back to the right path and let him return to your side. However, it is also a fact that Wally used to be a terrorist. If you directly bring him back, you will definitely be troubled by the major forces. Since that is the case, it is not strange to find a way to let Wally redeem himself and make up for his mistakes, right? If he wanted to redeem himself and make up for his mistakes, wasn't this trip to the vampire camp a good opportunity? If the members of the disaster group could be found in this operation, it would promote the successful conclusion of the peace agreement between the vampires. At that time, even if Athathiel brought Varley back to the fallen angel camp, no one would gossip about it anymore. I really can't hide anything from you. You are indeed the God Slayer who single-handedly promoted all the mythical organizations to conclude the peace treaty. I can't help but admire you. Athashel smiled bitterly. Well, after all, Vale's team is full of some amazing guys. The first son Wukong, the descendants of the King of Knights of Great Britain and the Cat Elf, the Demon Wolf who can even kill gods, and the strongest White Dragon Emperor in history. It is not a bad thing for us to win over this force, right? That's not something I should care about. Noah shrugged. I am just a witness to the peace treaty between the various forces. You can think about things outside the peace treaty. It has nothing to do with me. You are quite clear about it. Athashel snorted. However, Orpheus has always been feared by the major mythical forces because he doesn't have direct contact with them. If he maintains an aloof status, the deterrence of the major mythical forces will be greater. You can continue like this. Anyway, world peace depends on you, Lord Godslayer. World peace. Noah smiled without denying it, then asked directly. So, where are Vale and the others now? They are probably in the territory of the vampires and have sneaked in. Before they are clean, those guys can't enter the territory openly, Athashel said. By the way, yesterday, Vale was also attacked by an evil dragon. Attack by an evil dragon. Noah raised his eyebrows. Is it Glendale again? No, the evil dragon Vale encountered was not Glendale. Athashel's expression became a little solemn. Vale encountered Az-Dahaka, the three-headed demonic dragon of the sect of fire. Noah's pair of dark and deep eyes flickered slightly. Athashel did not notice Noah's reaction and continued to drive while saying so. The dark dragon of New Moon, Clon Kaur, the forbidden dragon of Manipul, Az Dahaka, and the dark dragon of Origin, Apophis. These three evil dragons are of the highest level even among all the evil dragons. They are second only to the Red Dragon Emperor and the White Dragon Emperor of the two heavenly dragons. If the Disaster Squad really intends to use the power of the evil dragons, they will definitely target these three evil dragons. Therefore, we have to be mentally prepared in advance to face these three terrifying evil dragons. Compared to Glendale, Arizona, Dahaka was undoubtedly much stronger. If the Disaster Squad used the power of the Holy Grail to revive all the evil dragons that were as famous as Az Dahaka, it would be a huge threat even to the major forces. Because this time we have you, an out-of-the-norm God Slayer, with us, we can come with such a large number of troops. Athashel sighed. Otherwise, in the face of enemies like the three-headed evil dragons, the rest of the evil dragons, the Disaster Squad, and the Vampires Taipshi faction, it would not be strange even if the major forces sent out their gods to form a crusade team. Noah fell into silence. Az Dahaka. The three-headed demonic dragon of the sect of fire. The highest level of evil dragon. Thinking of this, Noah suddenly laughed. Then let me see what kind of ability the three-headed demonic dragon that has not transcended its own myth and become the final trial of mankind is capable of. Chapter 1913. Wow! At the top of a cliff, the young girls of the gypsies looked at the scene in front of them and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. That was a rare sight of snow in normal times. Romania was a country with almost the same solar cycle as Japan. If Japan was welcoming winter, it was almost winter here too. However, the temperature here was lower and colder than Japan, and some places snowed all winter. This was one of those places. Therefore, the scene in front of them was completely covered by white snow, and the temperature was quite low. Even demons would feel cold. Therefore, the gypsies had already changed into winter clothes, and only Noah and Athaziel were still wearing their own clothes. Looking ahead, everyone could clearly see a city in front of them. It was a city surrounded by a hazy fog. That was naturally the city of vampires. In the city of vampires, the modern buildings were like a circle surrounding a magnificent castle. That castle was the royal city of the Capes faction. The buildings around the royal city had a contemporary style, as well as ancient medieval mansions. Combined together and covered with thick snow, it looked quite incredible. However, regardless of whether they were modern mansions or ancient mansions, the buildings here all shared a common characteristic. That was, no matter which building it was, there were very few windows, or even none at all. For vampires who lived in the dark, the purpose of windows was probably just for ventilation, and not for sunlight to shine in. After all, sunlight was the weakness of vampires. Because of this, at this time of the day, almost all vampires who were night residents were sleeping at home, and very few people were walking around in the city. Even if there were people walking around, those people would wear thick clothes in order to not expose their skin. Of course, even if they didn't do this, there would still be people who moved around during the day, right? Noah heard that vampires were divided into daywalkers and nightwalkers. As the name implied, the former were vampires who could move around in the sun, but they were relatively rare. The latter were absolute residents of the dark, completely unable to move around in the sun, and made up the majority of vampires. Gasper inherited the bloodline of a daywalker, and with his human part, Gasper could move around in the sun as usual. Other than that, the night walkers were also active during the day. Because in the vampire city, it was always shrouded in a very thick fog during the day. It was a fog created by a vampire's ability. Controlling fog was one of the abilities of vampires. If it was a high-ranking vampire, it wouldn't be strange for him to create a fog that covered an entire city. The fog was both a barrier and a means to detect the enemy. It could also block the sunlight, allowing the vampires to gain a certain degree of mobility during the day. By the way, the Camilla faction was located not too far away from here. Therefore, the arrival of Noah and his party should not only have been reported to the Capaci faction, but also to the Camilla faction. Our first destination is the royal city of the Capaci faction, Athathiel said to everyone. There, we need to talk to King Seps first, and then decide what to do next. The arrival of Noah and his party must have attracted the attention of the Capaci faction and the Camilla faction. Next, the Capaci faction should send someone here to contact Noah and his party. The Camilla faction, whose negotiations had failed, should also make corresponding countermeasures. It was even possible that they would send someone to prevent Noah and his party from contacting the Capaci faction. In other words, a battle could happen at any time. If they didn't enter a state of alert at this time, they would definitely be at a disadvantage if they were ambushed. Under such circumstances, Athathiel had entered a state of mental concentration, and the Jumanli's followers were in a formation. Although it was called a formation, it was actually to let Gasper, who was in charge of support, and Isha, who was in charge of healing, stay in the middle. The rest of the people surrounded the two of them, ready to deal with the enemy at any time. Only Noah left the main group and went forward boldly. He came to the edge of the cliff and looked at the city in the distance. At this time, Noah felt that the huge city was shrouded in an undercurrent instead of a fog. There was an indescribable sense of oppression. It's too quiet. Noah couldn't help but whisper. There's an indescribable silence. It's like the dead silence before the storm. This was the feeling that the Capaci faction's capital gave Noah. And this feeling gradually became stronger as time passed. The Jumanli's followers began to look at each other. Asashel furrowed his brows tightly as he muttered under his breath. That's not right. It's been so long. Even if the Camilla faction didn't take action, the Capaci faction should have taken action. Why hasn't anyone come? This was really a little abnormal. For the extremely xenophobic vampires, if someone broke into their territory, it was impossible not to send someone to check. But until now, neither the Capaci faction nor the Camilla faction had come. That was too abnormal. Just as this thought appeared in everyone's mind, Noah's eyes flashed, and he withdrew his gaze from the vampire city. He turned his head and looked in another direction. Seeing Noah's action, the Jumanli's followers were stunned. Only Athathiel immediately turned his head and looked in that direction with Noah. It seems that we have someone else to entertain us. Asashel folded his arms, and 12 black wings suddenly spread out from his back. His gaze was fixed in front of him. Aren't you going to come out and say hello? If the Jumanli's followers still did not react, they would be real fools. At that moment, all the Jumanli's subordinates suddenly turned around and stared ahead, mana fluctuations rising from their bodies. It was only at this moment that a casual voice sounded softly. Was it so easy to be discovered? As expected of the governor of the gods' layers and fallen angels. As these words were spoken, a figure slowly walked out from the forest in front of them. The newcomer had a head of silver hair. It was not Wally. It was Euclid, who Noah had met once yesterday. Sure enough, we meet again in the territory of the vampires. Euclid immediately looked at Noah and spread his hands. I knew you would come sooner or later, but I didn't expect it to be so soon. Noah didn't say anything. He just looked at Euclid. Nobody knew what he was thinking. On the other hand, Lyeth looked at the silver-haired Euclid with a somewhat bewildered expression. That appearance, that silver hair, and that aura, it's like, really like, Lyeth's whisper clearly reached Euclid's ears. Euclid turned his gaze and looked at Lyeth. Looking at Lyeth's bright red hair, his eyes became extremely cold and indifferent. Same to you, Lyeth Gimli. When I see your red hair, I can't help but think of Syzax, that hateful fake demon king. A fake demon king. She stared straight at Euclid. Are you a demon of the old Demon King's faction? You don't need to know. No, it should be said that you will know sooner or later, Euclid said coldly. Then, his gaze turned back to Noah. You are a little late. Just last night, there was a coup in the Saipesh faction. Now, the Saipesh king has fled, and a new king has been born. That person is the holder of the Holy Grail. W.H. What? Asashel exclaimed. Coup. Coup. Gimli's kin were also shocked. Even Noah was slightly startled and showed a surprised expression. Coup. A coup at this time. Isn't that too much of a coincidence? Could this also be the arrangement of the Mass of Calamity? By the way, the newly crowned king is no stranger to the vampires over there. Euclid glanced at Gasper, the corners of his mouth slowly rising. The new king is called Valerie Saipesh. You haven't forgotten, have you? V.A. Valerie. Gasper's eyes widened, full of disbelief. That expression made Euclid smile happily. If you rush over now, you might be able to see a good show. After saying that, Euclid decisively retreated and left the scene. Wait. Gimli's kin instinctively wanted to chase after him. Don't chase. Asashel immediately stopped them and said with a serious expression. Saipesh is more important now. The Jumanli subordinates glanced at each other and stopped. Asashel then looked at Noah. Noah met Asashel's gaze, nodded, and said concisely. Let's go. Everyone immediately soared into the sky without hesitation, turning into streaks of light as they flew towards the foggy vampire city, rushing towards the royal city of Opesh at top speed. Flying in the air, the cold wind whistled in their ears. However, Noah could still clearly hear Gasper's low muttering. Valerie. How could? It seemed that things were far more troublesome than he had imagined. Chapter 1914. Whoosh. The gale continued to howl. It was extremely cold and stung everyone's skin. With Noah and Asashel taking the lead, the gypsies spread their bat-like demonic wings and flew towards the royal city of Seeps as fast as they could. The buildings under them were like a revolving lantern, constantly receding behind them. Undoubtedly, there was a coup in the royal city. Even the new king had been elected, and the Seeps king was still on the run. However, the residents outside the royal city were calm as if nothing had happened. It made one's heart palpitate. Under such circumstances, everyone flew forward as fast as they could. Until a certain moment, a strange pressure suddenly surged from the front like an invisible wave and enveloped Noah's group. Everyone who was flying at high speed revealed shocked expressions one after another. Stop! Athashel yelled out. All of a sudden, Asashel and his subordinates came to an abrupt halt in midair, as though someone had slammed on the brakes. Feeling the pressure that pervaded the entire space, Noah also stopped. For the first time, his expression became solemn. Because the pressure was extremely strong. It was so strong that it was comparable to any of the three main gods of Greek mythology, Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon that Noah had fought before. Under this pressure, Noah slowly raised his head and looked forward. On the only way to Seeps' royal city, a figure seemed to be waiting for the arrival of Noah and his party. He slowly floated in midair. It was a man. A very inconceivable man. The man was wearing a black coat, and his hair was fluttering in the wind. It was black and gold, as if they were naturally intertwined. The man's eyes also had two colors. His left eye was a very deep black. His right eye was a very bright gold. The aura that fluctuated around him seemed to be able to grasp one's heart tightly and crush it into pieces. It was terrifying and dangerous. Looking at the figure who had appeared out of nowhere and blocked everyone's path, everyone's body tensed up and cold sweat began to drip down their faces. Including Asashel. At this moment, everyone clearly understood one thing. That man was definitely not ordinary. It was not a joke. The oppressive aura emanating from that person's body was already stronger than that of a god or demon king. It's him. Asashel stared at the man and clenched his fists. Did he really resurrect? Resurrect. Since Asashel said so, the man's identity was almost revealed. It can't be. Genova's voice became a little hoarse. Is that man an evil dragon? That's right. That man was an evil dragon. At least, Noah's superb senses told him that the aura fluctuating from that man was definitely not an aura that a human could have. It was an evil aura that was deeper, denser, and scarier than Glendale's. Although it was not like Glendale's aura that gave off a clear sense of evil, the man's aura made one's head tremble and constantly send a message to his master. Danger. That man was extremely dangerous. At this moment, Draeger's voice also rang in Noah's mind. Although he looks like a human, but with this aura, I don't even need to think to know who he is. Partner, you've encountered a powerful dragon. That guy, is he really an evil dragon? It's not just an evil dragon, it's the infamous evil dragon, Dalag said. Even among the evil dragons, he is one of the strongest existences, the dark dragon of the new moon Clon Kuvok. Clon Kuvok. The descendant of the Celtic demon god Balor. He had killed the divine king of the Danu gods, Nuada. He was one of the strongest evil dragons alongside Az Dahaka and Apophis. Now, he appeared in front of Noah's group in his human form. Who would have thought that they would encounter one of the strongest evil dragons in the legends at this time? Clon Kuvok was one of the strongest among the dragon kings, only below the sky dragon level. The group of underage demons were so nervous that their palms were sweating. This is going to be troublesome, Asashel couldn't help but mutter. Even if it's me, I'm still no match for that guy. Yes. Even the governor, whose strength was above the ordinary demon king level and enjoyed the highest level of power in the fallen angel camp, was no match for Clon Kuvok. Otherwise, Noah wouldn't be so serious. Noah glanced at the Opesh kingdom in front of him, then looked at Clon Kuvok, who was emitting a terrifying aura, and said indifferently, "You guys go first. You guys go first. Leave this to me." Teacher. The Jumanli subordinates were startled and turned to look at Noah. Let's go. Asashel said decisively. Noah is the only one among us who can suppress that strongest evil dragon. If we stay, we'll just be a hindrance. With that said, Asashel didn't hesitate at all. He flapped the 12 wings on his back and flew in the direction of the Escapades royal city. The Jumanli subordinates hesitated. Let's go. Liaz bit her lip and ordered. Leave this to teacher. As soon as Liaz gave the order, the Simonians had nothing else to say. Teacher, please be careful. With that, the Jumanli subordinates followed behind Athashel and flew in the direction of the Capezi royal city. Clon Kuvok didn't even move when he saw Athashel and the Jumanli's kin flying towards Kaipesh. His gaze landed directly on Noah's body. Noah, who was prepared to launch a thunderous attack when Clon Kuvok attacked Liaz and the others, raised an eyebrow. He met Clon Kuvok's gaze and seemed to understand something. I see. Noah understood instantly. So he's coming for me from the beginning. Although he's different from that lunatic Glendale, Clon Kuvok is very interested in powerful dragons, Drake said. He probably knows that you're the current Crimson Dragon Emperor, so he's interested in you. You have to be careful. That guy isn't something Glendale can compare to. An evil dragon that was second only to a sky dragon. As one of the two sky dragons, Drake knew very well the difference between Clon Kuvok and Glendale. That was why even though he knew about Noah's abilities, Drake couldn't help but remind him. Bam! However, before Delag could finish his sentence, a deep sonic boom suddenly resounded. The figure in front of him suddenly shot in front of Noah like a cannonball. He clenched his hand, which turned into a ferocious dragon claw. With a sharp sound, he cut through the air and viciously clawed at Noah's chest. That attack came suddenly and fiercely, and there was no room for error. Once hit, even if he didn't die, he would definitely be severely injured. If Noah didn't have superb senses, he probably wouldn't have been able to react in time, right? That was why Noah's eyes suddenly focused, and the majestic energy circulating in his body instantly turned into divine power. Whang! In the next instant, a dazzling golden aura fluctuated around Noah's body. It condensed and quickly turned into a solid shield of light. Pishich! The sharp and ferocious dragon claw didn't stop at all. It directly landed on the shield of light and actually pierced through it. Immediately after, the sharp dragon claw was like a deadly scythe. It didn't lose its momentum and went straight for Noah's chest. Seeing that, Noah's eyes became more and more focused, but he didn't dodge. Instead, his entire body surged with even more violent divine power, replenishing the penetrated shield of light. The shield of light that was cleanly penetrated was replenished by the vast divine power. It was as if it was frozen, and the sharp and ferocious dragon claw was firmly locked in place. The ferocious dragon claw that swept towards Noah's chest suddenly stopped. In the next second, Noah spat out a word. Explode! The condensed shield of light flashed with intense light. Chapter 1915. Kaboom! In the foggy sky, a thunderous roar suddenly resounded, shaking the extremely dense fog in the surroundings to the point that it suddenly stagnated. It was as if it was swept up by a gale, stirring up the fog. The violent impact was accompanied by a burst of dazzling light in the air. It was as if a meteorite had suddenly exploded there, stirring up an extremely powerful shock wave and dazzling light that surged to the surroundings like a tide. Immediately after, two figures were blasted out from the explosion, causing friction with the air. Under the sharp sound of breaking through the air, as if riding on the powerful shock wave, they slid hundreds of meters away before finally coming to a stop. Noah raised his eyes and looked ahead. Coincidentally, Klon Koak also looked over, and a hint of emotion finally appeared in its heterochromatic eyes. After an unknown amount of time, the powerful shock wave and blinding light that swept across the sky gradually dissipated. Noah and Klon Koak stood some distance apart, looking at each other as if they were both getting to know each other again. They fell into silence. After a while, Klon Koak spoke. "You are very strong." As soon as he spoke, the legendary mystic dragon, who enjoyed the title of the strongest evil dragon, acknowledged Noah's strength. That extremely sincere tone caused Noah to be involuntarily stunned, and a strange feeling arose in his heart. Evil dragons were extremely dangerous and uncontrollable existences. This was something that Drake had mentioned to Noah in the beginning. Therefore, almost all of the legendary evil dragons had been exterminated, and only left behind in history. Because of this, Noah thought that the evil dragons were like Glendale. Even if they weren't as crazy, there must be something wrong with them. However, Klon Koak gave Noah a feeling similar to Orpheus. It wasn't that Klon Koak was as innocent as Orpheus, but that it was in his heart. This strongest evil dragon seemed to be like Orpheus, very pure, and not as crazy and dangerous as Noah had imagined. The more powerful the dragon, the purer it is. Recalling what Drake had told him in the past, Noah felt that this theory could be applied to the evil dragons as well. However, no matter how pure the cloned Koa was, this evil dragon was still very dangerous. There was no doubt about that. Disregarding everything else, the power displayed by the other party just now was enough to put Noah in danger several times. The title of the strongest evil dragon below the heavenly dragon was not just for show. Noah suppressed the strange feeling in his heart and met Klon Koak's gaze. "You are also stronger than I thought. Other than Orpheus, you are the strongest dragon I have ever seen in this world." As expected of the evil dragon who once killed the divine king of the Danu gods. However, if you want to stop me, you should at least show your true form, right? Although he was facing Noah as a human, Clone Kvok was undoubtedly a dragon. Just now, when Clone Kvok attacked Noah, didn't he transform his arm into a ferocious dragon claw? This proved that Clone Kvok's current form was only a disguise, and his true form was still that of a dragon. And of course, only by transforming into a true dragon would Clone Kvok's full strength be displayed. In the short exchange just now, Clone Kvok did not use his full strength at all. Clone Kvok seemed to have seen through Noah's thoughts and shook his head lightly. Indeed, the power that the dragon form and the human form can display is different, but in terms of strength, the difference isn't that big. After all, although the dragon form can display more power, the human form is more flexible in all aspects and has its own advantages. Changing one's form according to the situation will also be very advantageous in battle. And I think that, to deal with you, it's not enough to just rely on brute force. So, in the attack just now, I used my human form and also transformed into a dragon's hand. It can be considered as a half-dragon, which should be the best form to deal with you. As he said that, Clone Kvok stared at Noah with a burning gaze. Also, you didn't use the power of a dragon, did you? I know that you are the current Crimson Dragon Emperor. From Clone Kvok's eyes and words, Noah could feel the other party's attachment to the word dragon. Just like what Drake said, Clone Kvok must have an unusual view and thought about dragons. Understanding this, Noah, who was preparing to use another cosmology, glanced at Clone Kvok with a meaningful look. Then, he dismissed the idea of using another cosmology. Now was the time to race against time. The coup d'état in Seep's kingdom was still ongoing. With that in mind, the best course of action was to use another cosmology and take down the strongest evil dragon. However, with Clone Kvok's attachment to dragons, if Noah couldn't satisfy him, perhaps this evil dragon would be like Glendale and pester Noah until he died. In that case, in terms of time, it would be more likely that he would be pestered even longer after using another cosmology. If that's the case, I might as well satisfy you a little. As soon as Noah finished speaking, a crimson-red gauntlet flashed and appeared on his right hand. Clone Kvok's gaze immediately landed on the gauntlet. His black and gold eyes seemed to be able to see the soul residing in the divine artifact. He spoke softly. "Long time no see, Drake." Clone Kvok's words made the jade on the back of the gauntlet flash. "Indeed, it has been a long time." Drake's voice came from the jade. "The last time we met was when I wasn't sealed and you weren't destroyed, right? The last time we met, you weren't like this." Clone Kvok tilted his head and said. "However, you're wrong about one thing. I haven't been destroyed." "Whoa. What?" Noah was stunned. "Haven't been destroyed?" Drake was even more shocked. "You haven't been destroyed." "That's right." Clone Kvok nodded. "Let's not talk about the other evil dragons, but I haven't been destroyed. After all, compared to the other evil dragons, I'm considered honest, so no one targeted me. In other words, you've been alive since ancient times until now." Drake seemed to be in disbelief. "Then what have you been doing all this time?" "Nothing much." Clone Kvok said. "I've been observing dragons all over the world and persisted in training." Such a pure and honest answer. Not to mention Drake, even Noah was speechless. Observing dragons all over the world all this time. With Clone Kvok's persistence towards dragons, that was indeed possible. But persisting in training all this time. Since before Drake was sealed, Clone Kvok had persisted in training all this time. In that case, what level had the evil dragon, who had been known as the strongest evil dragon after the heavenly dragon, reached? As if he saw through Noah and Drake's thoughts, Clone Kvok suddenly smiled and his entire body surged with a terrifying aura. That aura was far more powerful than what they felt before. That was what Klon Kovac had said. Now, even if it's the old Drake, I don't think I'll lose. His words caused Noah's eyes to narrow slowly. I've miscalculated, partner. Drake's voice became serious. Klon Kovac has probably surpassed himself and reached the level of a Rubian and I. What did this mean? That evil dragon has most likely reached the level of a sky dragon. Even if it's compared to the top 10 in the world, it wouldn't lose out. This was Klon Kovac's true strength. At this moment, a burst of laughter rang out in the air. An evil dragon that has reached the level of a sky dragon. I'm interested in you. Following this sentence, a white meteor shot out from the other side of the sky. Chapter 1916. Silver Juggernaut Overdrive. Fall the absolute law to the White Dragon Emperor of Darkness. Noah, on the other hand, was completely stunned. That juggernaut form can only be used for a few minutes. If the power is overused, it may even be counted in seconds. Therefore, Wally Lucifer will probably end the battle quickly. Noah directly went into the hole. Just as Drake had said, Varley's figure suddenly transformed into a white meteor, drawing several beautiful trajectories as he violently shot towards Klon Kovac's direction. In the flash of silver, the pure white color of Wally's armor was mixed with silver, gradually turning into a silver full-body armor. Its shape also changed slightly, becoming like an organic composition. The two heavenly dragons that have been fighting and killing since ancient times are actually standing together like this. It's really a rare scene. The most basic point was that the Tyrannosaurus was a power born from a curse. When it was activated, it would be accompanied by astonishing resentment and hatred. It was extremely ominous. Is that so? Klon Kovac stopped smiling and nodded very seriously. That's right. A battle without any glory is meaningless. Even if you are a dragon that is called the embodiment of power, you should follow your own glory and fight. Thank you for letting me see your way of the dragon, White Dragon Emperor. It was a power that was very similar to the Tyrannosaurus, but it was poles apart. The two were actually evenly matched. It looked like a real white dragon. A coup was taking place in the royal city, but the ordinary residents outside were not aware of it at all. With such a whisper, an unprecedented and astonishing power soared from Wally's body, turning into spiritual energy that was visible to the naked eye, surging in all directions. However, Wally Lucifer has adjusted the Tyrannosaurus and redeveloped it. He only drew out the power of the Tyrannosaurus and completely swallowed the curse with his own fighting spirit, causing the Tyrannosaurus to evolve into a new form. It avoids danger and can still grow. It was difficult for a heavenly dragon's power to defeat a real heavenly dragon for only a few minutes. Varley's whole body swelled with a terrifying aura, like a hurricane, sweeping in all directions. With that, Noah no longer paid any attention to the two meteors colliding repeatedly in the sky. They flew in the direction of the royal city of Opesh. It was just that Noah's swaggering intrusion attracted a huge commotion. Klon Kovac, one of the strongest evil dragons in the legends. He has been training since ancient times, and has already reached the level of a heavenly dragon. Varley stared at Klon Kovac, his voice filled with battle intent. The deafening sound of the collision resounded. I just think that a battle without glory is meaningless, Wally said bluntly. Simply put, Tyrannosaurus Rex had no side effects at all. Tyrannosaurus Rex without any side effects. I shall become the Immaculate Dragon Emperor. Sensing the terrifying aura emanating from Wally's body, Klon Kovac's expression became more and more solemn, but at the same time, his fighting spirit also burned like flames. However, at this moment, the Tyrannosaurus Rex that Wally activated did not have any negative emotions or ominous aura. Under such circumstances, Wally bathed in an astonishing amount of spirit energy, like an erupting volcano. The wings of light on his back spread out, and one of his hands was raised high. The pure white armor was wrapped in a holy light, and the precious gems on every part of it immediately blossomed with dazzling light. I shall awaken as an opponent, it's really the most suitable. However, at this moment, a big hole had been broken in the barrier. It should be the work of Asashel and Jumanli's subordinates. Moreover, it was Wally who had entered the forbidden state. Because the opponent also chose to fight with pure strength, that's why they are evenly matched, right? But it was precisely because of this that Noah was so surprised. Noah, who had seen Wally's Tyrannosaurus Rex, was certain that the power Wally was using now was very similar to Tyrannosaurus Rex, but it was fundamentally different from Tyrannosaurus Rex. The power that the previous Crimson Dragon Emperor and White Dragon Emperor were unable to achieve was now finally achieved by Wally. If we must fight, I hope to challenge him as Wally Lucifer, and not follow the fate of the Crimson Dragon Emperor and White Dragon Emperor and fight without any purpose. The white meteor and the black meteor soared into the sky like two thunderbolts chasing after each other. All the way up, they collided again and again, stirring up sounds of collision that shook the heavens and the earth. It set off waves of shockwaves that stirred up the space, causing this part of the world to suddenly become a battlefield that no one could enter. In terms of strength alone, Tyrannosaurus Rex is definitely at the heavenly dragon level. Since that Tyrannosaurus Rex has inherited all of Tyrannosaurus Rex's strength, it's naturally the same. However, if it's just strength that's at the heavenly dragon level, it can't compare to the strongest evil dragon that has truly reached the heavenly dragon level, Drake said. What did this mean? Even so, in the end, Wally should be undefeatable, right? The energy fluctuations on Wally's body continued to rise, causing space to distort slightly. The surrounding fog also became chaotic and trembled. If that's the case, then thank me with a battle. Wally took a step forward and said in a low voice. I won't accompany you, Klon Kvotch. Let's fight again next time if we have the chance. I will lead thee to the pinnacle of silver fantasy and demonic path. This generation's Crimson Dragon Emperor and White Dragon Emperor are both terrifying existences that the previous generations cannot compare to. Although Tyrannosaurus Rex is very outstanding in terms of strength, it is accompanied by life-threatening danger and the possibility of going berserk. That is a cursed power. Drake's voice sounded in Noah's mind. Klon Kvotch resolutely used his full strength against Wally, who was using Tyrannosaurus Rex. A shockwave suddenly spread out like a huge explosion, setting off a frenzied airflow that mixed with the dense fog in the surroundings and rushed in all directions. In the next second, Klon Kvotch turned into a black meteor and shot forward, meeting the white meteor head-on. White Dragon Emperor. Klon Kvotch looked at Wally, then looked at Noah, who was standing side by side with Wally, and couldn't help but smile. It was a person covered in pure white armor with a pair of faint blue light wings on his back. A burst of silver light blossomed from Wally's body, instantly illuminating the entire world and dispelling the surrounding fog. Surprisingly, it was Wally. In the past, Noah and Wally had fought before. Noah Dole, look carefully, this is the power I developed to defeat you. Noah's eyes also flickered slightly and his gaze fell on Wally. The reason was that Kepeshi's entire royal city was enveloped by a huge barrier. Silver Tyrannosaurus Rex. In that battle, Wally used Tyrannosaurus Rex and displayed a power that was not inferior to gods and demon kings. However, although the danger is avoided, the consumption is unavoidable, right? Drake said. Dong. However, since Wally blocked the opponent, I'm happy to do so. Noah smiled. Immediately, Wally began to chant. Klon Kvotch immediately roared to the sky, and his body suddenly expanded, bursting the coat on his body. In the blink of an eye, he turned into a pitch-black dragon, shaking with a terrifying aura. In the sharp sound of breaking through the air, the white meteor streaked across the sky, carrying a whistling force. Under Klon Kvotch's gaze, it swept past Noah's side. At this moment, Klon Kvotch's gaze suddenly froze. Only then did the white meteor stop, revealing its full appearance under the light. "It's not just you, partner. White Dragon Emperor is also exploring a new way to use Tyrannosaurus Rex and has succeeded," Drake said solemnly and helplessly. Roar, 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 roar. Whoosh. After all, although Tyrannosaurus Rex did not have the side effects of Tyrannosaurus Rex, the consumption was unavoidable and could only be maintained for a few minutes at most. Through the dream of dawn with infinite destruction, go to Tyrannosaurus. Chapter 1917. Oh. When Noah landed on the open space in front of the main city, a large group of fully armed soldiers rushed out of the buildings in all directions and surrounded Noah. Noah, who had superb sensing ability, had long noticed that there was a very strong vampiric aura in the surrounding buildings, and there were quite a lot of them. However, he did not know whether they were the government or anti-government soldiers of the Sepishi faction, so he did not make a move. However, the vampires that swarmed out of the buildings in all directions did not seem to have such concerns. The leader of the vampires ordered. "Are they the fallen angel and demon companions who just came to help King Sepish? Kill him for me." Now, Noah didn't even need to ask to know which side the other party was from. There was no doubt that these vampires were all anti-government soldiers who had uncovered the coup d'état. Oh. Amidst the surging shouts, the vampire soldiers surrounding Noah all raised the weapons in their hands and charged at Noah. A sharp light flashed in Noah's eyes. Just like that, the densely packed vampire soldiers instantly drowned Noah like a human tide. Bang! In the next instant, a surge of divine power exploded from the center of the tide of vampire soldiers, turning into a substantial impact that swept out like a violent storm. Ah! The blood-curdling screams of the vampires resounded. Each and every one of them was sent flying like a piece of trash, crashing into the surrounding buildings and cracking the walls. What? The vampire who had just given the order was shocked. In just a short moment, an entire army of vampires was annihilated. How was this possible? At this moment, a figure dashed in front of the vampire, stretched out his hand, grabbed the vampire's collar, and lifted him up. "You did mention the fallen angel and the devil just now, right?" Noah looked at the vampire, and his dark eyes flashed with a cold light. "Where are they?" That vampire seemed to be truly frightened. With trembling lips and trembling hands, he pointed in the direction of the main city. There, a hole was blasted open in the wall. Noah immediately threw the vampire on the ground, then sped up his pace, entered the hole, and entered the castle. Asashel and the Jumanli subordinates seemed to be racing against time. They ignored the vampire army guarding outside and directly entered the castle to cause a ruckus. At the very least, after entering the castle, Noah could see traces of the walls, floor, and ceiling being blasted apart. There were also vampire soldiers lying all over the ground. It was apparent that a huge battle had taken place. Whether these traces of battle were left behind by Asashel and the Jaimonians, or by Seps's government faction against the anti-government faction, was unknown. Thus, if they followed the traces left behind by the battle, it was very likely that they wouldn't run into Asashel and Jumanli's men in the end. Fortunately, there were still some remnants of the light and mana used in the battle between Asashel and the Jumanli followers in the air. Noah used his extraordinary sensing ability to follow the remnants of the light and mana and rushed in a direction. However, at a certain moment, in the range of Noah's sensing ability, an extremely familiar aura suddenly appeared. Noah's footsteps slowed and he stopped where he was. He closed his eyes and fully activated his sensing ability, feeling that aura over and over again. After a while, Noah seemed to have confirmed something and opened his eyes. Then, Noah's expression became hesitant. To be honest, Noah really wanted to go to the location of that aura. Because, since that aura had appeared, Noah definitely couldn't sit back and do nothing. However, Asashel and the Jumanli followers were also fighting in this castle, and it was very likely that they had already encountered the other evil dragons. Against the legendary evil dragons, Asashel would be fine, but the Jumanli followers would be in danger. However, there shouldn't be any problems, right? After all, Noah could sense that there was still some power in the remnants of the light and mana in the air. That was the power of Black Cat, Luffy, Arthur, Monkey, and Fenrir. At the same time, as Wally's teammates, those with extraordinary backgrounds, also began to move. They were probably with Asashel and the Jumanli followers. With those people, at least the safety of the Jumanli followers would be guaranteed. Thinking of this, Noah turned his gaze to the location of that familiar aura. Since the clone Koa had appeared and blocked Noah's path, it proved that the group of disasters who had obtained the power of the evil dragon wanted the anti-government faction to succeed in their coup d'état and drive out the government's vampires. In other words, the group of disasters was most likely working together with the anti-government faction that started the coup. The previous rulers of the Zepesh faction should not have known about this. The evidence was that the holder of the Holy Grail had become the new king of the Zepesh faction, while the old Zepesh king had begun to flee during the coup. As an indispensable force in reviving the evil dragons, the anti-government faction that supported the holder of the Holy Grail to become the new king of the Zepesh faction was naturally the target of the group of disasters. In other words, the opponents were not only the anti-government faction, but also the evil dragons and members of the group of disasters. And the familiar aura that appeared in the range of Noah's sensing ability was currently an insurmountable trump card of the group of disasters. If Asashel and the Jumanli followers met with Wally's team, even if they were all tied together, only death awaited them. Considering this point, it was better to go over there first. Thus, Noah finally made a decision. He lifted his feet and slowly walked towards the location of that aura. Tap, 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 tap. Strong and powerful footsteps were extremely clear in the corridor. Noah looked straight ahead and walked forward without hesitation. As Noah approached, the familiar aura became stronger and stronger. Until a certain moment, Noah finally saw it. In front of him, in the middle of a group of vampires that had fallen on the ground, a petite figure stood there. It was a young girl with an extremely cute face wearing a dark-colored dress. The girl's appearance was only 12 or 13 years old, very young and tender. However, the atmosphere around the young girl had a profound feeling, as if it was a tranquil dark night, intoxicating. That feeling, that appearance, to Noah, was simply too familiar. Because, for more than a month, the original owner of that face had been living under the same roof as Noah, eating together, sleeping together, and even bathing together. How could they not be familiar with each other? Thus, Noah almost subconsciously called out softly. Orpheus, yes. Orpheus. She looked exactly like Orpheus, even the aura was not the slightest bit different. The only difference was that she tied up her waist-length black hair with a hairband, leaving a single ponytail hairstyle. Of course, that petite girl was not Orpheus. Although her appearance and aura were exactly the same as Orpheus, Noah was sure that she was definitely not Orpheus. The reason was simple. The real Orpheus was left at home by Noah, and as usual, he was accompanied by Aster and Athena. If Orpheus had come here, Noah would have known. In that case, who was the petite girl who looked exactly like Orpheus, and even had the same aura as Orpheus? Noah knew. That petite girl was also Orpheus. To be precise, it should be Orpheus' clone. More than a month ago, the heroes had taken half of Orpheus' power. Chow Chow had said that the disaster squad would use half of the power to create a new Orpheus. The girl in front of him was another Orpheus. Another Orpheus created with half of the power of the infinite dragon god. In the next second, she turned her head and looked at Noah. Chapter 19:18. When the petite girl's gaze turned to Noah and met with Noah's eyes, the girl's eyes never moved away again. Her behavior was exactly the same as Orpheus when Noah met him before. In addition, the other party's appearance and aura were exactly the same as Orpheus. All of a sudden, Noah seemed to have let down his guard against the girl and relaxed his shoulders. It was also at this moment that the girl suddenly disappeared from where she stood. When she reappeared, she was already in front of Noah. Noah suddenly came back to his senses, but he did not do anything. Instead, he lowered his head and looked at the girl who suddenly appeared in front of him. Immediately, the girl sniffed her cute little nose and moved closer to Noah. She looked like a small animal looking for food, which was abnormally cute. The girl who moved closer to Noah, or even to Noah, sniffed her cute nose, and her voice sounded like clear water droplets. Smell, although the voice was very pleasant to the ears, it did not have the slightest trace of emotion. Even in this aspect, it was exactly the same as Orpheus. Smell, the girl muttered to herself while sniffing Noah's scent. It has the same smell as Lilith. Lilith? Is that the name of this Orpheus clone? The same smell as Orpheus clone. Is that referring to the smell of Orpheus? Noah thought so while looking at Lilith, who was constantly moving closer to him with no expression on her delicate and cute face, and he was very sure of it. Sure enough, even if it was a clone created by disaster, the girl in front of him was still Orpheus. The dragon god was as pure and innocent as a lotus flower, without any filth or filth. Understanding this, Noah took a deep breath, squatted down, and maintained the same height as Lilith. Their eyes met again. Your name is Lilith, right? Noah looked straight at the petite girl. My name is Noah. Nah, yeah. Lilith tilted her head and repeated. Noah. That's right, Noah. Noah smiled. A family relationship with the other you. Another me. Lilith was stunned for a moment before she stared closely at Noah. The other Lilith. Family. As expected, Lilith knew about Orpheus. However, perhaps because she hadn't been born for a long time, she seemed to be even more ignorant than Orpheus. If Orpheus' mind was at the level of a child, then Lilith's was at the level of a baby. This made Noah even more certain of his thoughts. This child could not continue to stay in the group of disasters and be used by those terrorists. So, Noah said to Lilith. Do you want to be with your other self? Lilith was stunned. With my other self. Lilith. Lilith tilted her head and kept muttering. With my other self. Lilith. Yes, with your other self. Noah reached out his hand to Lilith. Be with Orpheus and become my family. Family, together. Lilith sucked on a finger and stared at Noah's hand that was extended to her. Family. Together, looking at Lilith like this, Noah secretly thought that there was a chance. However, an untimely voice suddenly rang out, stirring up a mess. Aya, that won't do. Sister Long is my trump card, I can't lose her here. Accompanied by such a frivolous voice, Lilith, who stared straight at Noah's hand, withdrew her gaze, and her petite body disappeared again, returning to her original position. Noah's face sank fiercely. He slowly stood up, then raised his head and looked ahead. At the end of the corridor, a figure was walking briskly, humming a song like a child who was walking and jumping at the same time. He walked over happily and appeared in front of Noah. Oh, this must be the famous God Slayer, right? The newcomer said in an extremely frivolous tone as he giggled. I didn't expect that even the clone Kua couldn't stop the deicide. Fortunately, I didn't run over myself out of curiosity, otherwise, would be dead. Such frivolous words and tone came from the mouth of a middle-aged man. It was a man in his 40s with a head of very eye-catching silver hair. However, compared to the man's hair color, his outfit was more eye-catching. It was the same outfit as Sazek's. However, Sazek's outfit was real red, while the middle-aged man's was silver. As for his appearance, maybe it was Noah's illusion. Noah felt that the man's appearance seemed to be similar to Varley's. Looking at Noah, who was looking directly at him, the middle-aged man raised his eyebrows. Speaking of which, the deicide still doesn't know who I am, right? In that case, let me introduce myself to the young godslayer. The middle-aged man pretended to salute in a playful manner. Uncle's name is Lesavim Levi Lucifer, please enlighten me. Lucifer. Noah's eyes narrowed slightly. Lesavim Levi Lucifer. Noah had heard of this name before. Lesavim Levi Lucifer. It was recorded in the Bible under the name Laren, the son of the real demon king Lucifer and the mother of demons, Lilith. In other words, Lesavim was the son of the real demon king Lucifer. Lucifer, one of the old 4 demon kings who had passed away, was the biological father of the man in front of him. What did this mean? It meant that Lesavim was Varley's blood relative who had inherited Lucifer's bloodline. That was why Noah felt that Lesavim was a bit similar to Varley. The middle-aged man in front of him was Varley's grandfather. His biological grandfather. Moreover, Noah had heard of such a rumor. In the past, in the era of the old 4 demon kings, there were 3 who were completely different from the other demons. They had extremely powerful abilities, making people wonder if they were special existences of demons. Surpassers. Simply put, they were the mutants of demons. Sarsax Gimenri and Ichuka Astaroth were 2 of them. After the death of the 4 demon kings, the 2 of them obtained the demon king position of Lucifer and Beelzebub respectively with powerful abilities that surpassed demons. They were considered legends in the demon realm. The remaining surpasser was the son of the demon king who had inherited Lucifer's bloodline, Lesavim Levi Lucifer. In other words, the man in front of him was also a mutant of demons and had powerful abilities that demons did not have. Varley's grandfather. Noah first glanced at Lilith, who stayed beside Lesavim like a follower, and then looked at him coldly. I see. You're in charge of the group of disasters now, right? I have no choice. I'm related to the Godslayer. Lesavim spread out his hands. The old Demon King faction and the Hero faction are finished, right? The rest of the motley crew needs someone to lead them, right? And Sister Long is like this. She can't be the leader at all, right? So only I, the son of the Demon King, can make everyone love each other. Undoubtedly, he was the son of the former real Demon King and was equivalent to the Prince of the Demon Realm. However, his words and actions gave people the feeling of a clown acting, which was really disgusting. At least, Noah began to wonder if the son of the Demon King in front of him was a surpasser who was as famous as Sarsax and Ichuka. However, there was one thing that was certain. The current leader of the group of disasters was the son of Lucifer in front of him. If he directly killed the son of the Demon King here, then the group of disasters would really collapse, right? Lesavim did not know if he had sensed Noah's thoughts, but he laughed very happily. Son of the Godslayer, your eyes are full of murderous intent. It's so scary. Sister Long, quickly come and protect me. With that, Lesavim opened his arms in the direction of Lilith, intending to hug her. However, at this moment, an unprecedented pressure rose from Noah's body. Immediately, Noah's voice sounded. Who allowed you to touch her with your dirty hands? Chapter 1919. The sudden pressure caused the frivolous smile on Lesavim's face to freeze. His movements stiffened, and he couldn't move at all. Lilith, on the other hand, shifted her gaze back to Noah and stared at him. Her eyes, which were as deep as the night, rippled with some ripples. Lesavim could only stop what he was doing and look at Noah. Although his expression wasn't good, his frivolous smile was still there. It seems that our Godslayer really likes Sister Long. By the way, the other Sister Long seems to be on your side. How greedy. I don't deny that I'm greedy, Noah said indifferently. Whether it's Orpheus or Lilith, I'll bring them out of the disaster cluster. Is that so? Lesavim raised his eyebrows and smiled. Oh, why bother? If you want Sister Long, you just have to tell me. It's not like I can't give her to you. But, there's a condition, right? Noah glanced at Lezivim with a mocking expression. That condition, don't tell me it's for me to join the disaster cluster. Well, it seems that our Godslayer doesn't like to stay on my side. Lezivim curled his lips. If that's the case, then I can't give Sister Long to you. You can't give her to me. Noah narrowed his eyes and walked toward Lezivim step by step. Don't tell me that I need your permission for anything I want. What? Don't tell me you want to attack me. Lezivim winked at Zhang Tai. Then I can only call for help. After saying that, Lezivim suddenly snapped his fingers. Clank. Suddenly, a huge teleportation array appeared on the ground behind Lezivim, blooming with dazzling light. The radiance of each magic array was different. However, the auras that rose from within were equally terrifying and powerful. Then, figures of various sizes emerged from within and appeared in this world. Roar, roar, roar! In the next instant, earth-shattering roars resounded from those figures, turning into a sound wave that reverberated in all directions. The mixed roar was like a substantial shockwave that blew away the fallen vampires on the ground and cracked the surrounding walls, ceiling, and ground. It even swept toward Noah's direction, making his robes flutter. Noah's eyes flickered uncontrollably at the sight of the gigantic and normal-sized figures. Then, let me give you a grand introduction. Lezivim opened his arms and spoke loudly like a manipulator of many giant beasts. The one on our left is our Lord Glendale, who once fought the God Slayer himself. Ha 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 ha. Glendale's eyes as he stared at Noah. Human, we meet again. This time, let us have the most tragic battle. It was none other than Glendale, who was once beaten to a pulp by Noah. Next to our Lord Glendale is the guardian of the Golden Apple, who was defeated by the great hero Hercules in Greek mythology. Lezivim pointed to an evil dragon next to Glendale. The evil dragon born by the king of monsters, Typhon Maiden. An evil dragon made of wood with multiple heads, which perfectly fit the image of a wood dragon, suddenly looked at Noah with great interest. Is that the legendary God Slayer? I wonder if he can break my barrier and defense. Next to our Maiden is the legendary black dragon that lives in northern Europe. Even if he's killed, he'll be resurrected in the end. He might even survive the twilight of the gods, and he dares to gnaw on the world tree. Lezivim introduced with great interest. The evil dragon that's full of greed and will devour everything in sight. Nidhogg. An evil dragon with black scales and an earthen yellow abdomen that was more than 20 meters long and had 4 limbs and dragon wings also looked at Noah. Disgusting saliva flowed out of the corner of his mouth. Although he's just a human, he looks quite tasty. Next is the most powerful evil dragon. Everyone is afraid of him. Even the gods are afraid of him, Lord Dragon. Lezivim's voice was getting louder and louder. In Egyptian mythology, he's the embodiment of chaos and destruction that tried to engulf the entire world in darkness. Apophis. In front of the 3 gigantic evil dragons, Glendale, Radon, and Nidhogg, a handsome young man with brown skin and priest-like attire lifted his eyes and looked at Noah. The corners of his mouth slowly curled into a smile. I've always wanted to see the legendary God Slayer. Today, my wish is finally fulfilled. Next, there's no need for me to introduce you. The evil Dragon Lord, who has already met our God Slayer once, has also made his grand entrance. Lezivim shouted as if he was shocked by himself, but in fact, he was very happy. That's the God Slayer from Celtic mythology. He wasn't resurrected by the Holy Grail. He's the dark dragon that's still alive. Clon Kvotch. Yes. Next to Apophis, Clon Kovac appeared. His coat was gone, and his upper body was bare. His eyes, one gold and one black, turned to Noah, and a smile appeared on his face. I've fought the White Dragon Emperor, but he's still no match for me. That's why I've come to find you. Just as Noah expected, even if Varley developed the Tyrannosaurus without any side effects, he still couldn't defeat Clonquatch, who had reached the level of a sky dragon. Under such circumstances, the smile on Lezavim's face grew wider and wider. Behind him, an evil dragon that was smaller than Glendale, Radon, and Nidhogg, but it had 3 heads. Its skin was pitch black, its eyes were crimson red, and it had a pair of dragon wings on its back. It was an evil dragon that was smaller than Glendale, Radon, and Nidhogg. This evil dragon lord is very obvious, so obvious that I don't need to introduce him. The Deicide should know him, right? Lezawim grinned. He's as famous as our Clonquatch and Apophis. Together, they're known as the strongest evil dragon. He's the infamous evil dragon in the sect of Fire Azidahaka. Under Lezavim's call, the 3-headed demonic dragon laughed ferociously. Ha! So this is the God Slayer. It doesn't feel any different from other humans. No different. No different. Azidahaka's 3 heads seemed to have their own thoughts. They spoke separately, giving off a rather strange feeling. In addition, its skin was an ominous pitch-black color, not the pure white color that Noah had imagined. The 3-headed demonic dragon in front of him was completely different from the 3-headed demonic dragon that Noah had encountered in the box. How is it? How is it? Lezavim smiled cheerfully as if he was anticipating Noah's shock and fear. Uncle, my lineup of helpers is luxurious enough, right? Great Evil Dragon Lord's great discount. Dark Dragon of the New Moon, Clonquatch. Forbidden Dragon of the Mana Source, Azidahaka. The Primordial Dark Nether Dragon, Apophis. The Tyrannosaurus of Great Sin, Grendel. Guardian Dragon of the Treasured Tree, Maiden. Dead Dragon of the Law, Nidhogg. Almost all of the legendary evil dragons of various mythological systems were present. This frighteningly powerful lineup surrounded Lezawim, and their gazes were all focused on Noah. Waves of terrifying auras rose from the evil dragons one after another, and as if gravity had materialized, they fiercely suppressed the entire space. Chapter 1920. Roar, 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 roar. Earth-shattering roars came from the mouths of the evil dragons. When they mixed together, it vaguely felt like the roars of 10,000 beasts, which was very shocking. Looking at the happy Lezavim, the expressionless Lilith, and the roaring evil dragons, Noah had to admit that this lineup was really quite amazing. Lezavim was the son of the Demon King who shared the title of Surpasser with Syzax and Ichuka. Lilith was half of Orpheus and had half of Orpheus' power. Although the dragon gods, infinite, had become limited because of the division of power, resulting in a drop in strength that was far more than half, even so, Orpheus still exceeded 4 digits and was between 3 and 4 digits. He was much more powerful than the other top 10 existences in the world. Presumably, Lilith was the same, right? As for those evil dragons, they were existences that turned the world upside down in their respective myths and legends. Glendale, Radon, and Nidhogg were definitely Dragon King level evil dragons, which were stronger than the average Demon King level evil dragons. Even Azazel was not confident of winning against them. Azazel, Dahaka and Apophis were even more so. They were as famous as Clone Kuva and were known as the strongest evil dragons. They were only below the heavenly dragon level and were comparable to gods. As for Clone Kuva, he had surpassed himself and reached the heavenly dragon level through continuous training. Even Wally, who had developed the Tyrannosaurus Rex, was defeated in a head-on confrontation. With such a lineup, not to mention dealing with one person, it was definitely enough to deal with a mythical force. It was believed that even a top 10 powerhouse in the world would not be able to survive against such a lineup. Although Noah was ranked second among the top 10 powerhouses in the world, with his current strength, he could not face such a terrifying lineup alone. Without the use of another cosmology, the star map of creation, another cosmology. Therefore, looking at the shocking lineup, Noah suddenly laughed. Good. Very good. Noah's voice echoed very clearly in the surroundings. Since all of you are here, that's great. As soon as he finished speaking. Clang! A burst of bright starlight burst out from Noah's body. As long as I get rid of all of you, I'll be done once and for all. As Noah's voice rang out and the resplendent starlight surged, waves of berserk power gushed into Noah's body like streams of turbulence. Buzz! Suddenly, the aura on Noah's body gradually swelled. With a shocking momentum, it soared crazily. In the blink of an eye, it was above everyone else. All of the evil dragons present abruptly stopped breathing, and their roars came to an abrupt halt. Even the expressionless Lilith couldn't help but widen her eyes slightly, and her petite body subconsciously tensed up. On the other hand, Lezavim stared closely at Noah, who was bursting with a terrifying aura like a demon god. The smile on his face gradually disappeared, and a frightening look flashed across his eyes. So that's how it is. So this is the almost invincible, another cosmology, that can imitate any object other than humans and absorb the opponent's power for its own use. Although it's a bit strange for me to say it, it's indeed a foul power. It's so foul that it makes people want to curse their mothers. Lezavim laughed again. However, I'm not unprepared. After saying that, Lezavim raised his hand. On that hand, a cup with a golden luster floated in mid-air, emitting an unusually dense holy aura. That's... Noah was stunned, and then his face sank. That's the Sephiroth's cup. That's right. Lezavim laughed frivolously. Uncle, I took this holy cup out of the original owner's body. How about it? Are you surprised? More than a month ago, after Noah revealed his true trump card, his, another cosmology, was no longer a secret. In that case, it was impossible for Lezavim not to prepare a countermeasure. With the holy cup, even if the evil dragon lords are killed, I can continue to revive them. If you keep killing, I'll keep reviving. In that case, even if we can't win, we won't lose, right? Lezavim said with a smile. At that time, the God Slayer and the evil dragon lords will be able to fight until the end of the world. They will destroy this castle, this city, and even this vampire kingdom. How many vampires will be sacrificed at that time? 10. 100. 1,000. Or all of them will die. Lezavim clapped his hands and cheered. Just thinking about it makes one's blood boil. The bright starlight and violent aura that rose from Noah's body suddenly froze. Is this your goal? Noah looked at Lezavim, his eyes flashing with coldness and anger. Using the entire vampire world as a hostage. I can't help it. The God Slayer is so scary that even the various mythological forces are afraid of you. Since I want to go against you, I have to use a little trick. Lezavim grinned. But, I have the demeanor of a bad guy, right? That's not bad, right? Who asked me to be a bad demon? La 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 la. At this moment, Noah really felt that his limits were being challenged. Originally, he thought that with his current state of mind, no matter how others provoked him, he wouldn't be easily angered and fall into the trap of others. But Lezavim was like the crystallization of malice. It was as if he existed specifically to challenge other people's bottom line. It really made people angry. This guy was a bastard. Noah clearly understood this point. At this moment, Lezavim suddenly changed the topic. How about this, God Slayer? You don't use that, another cosmology, and I won't use the Sephiroth's cup. Let's have a good fight, how about that? Hearing this, Noah was stunned. Then, he understood something and laughed sarcastically. No wonder you used so much nonsense to pave the way. So that's the reason. Noah raised his head and cast his gaze on the evil dragons that were looking at him with violent and aggressive eyes. He sneered as if he was talking to himself. No matter how well prepared you are, these legendary level evil dragons are known for being dangerous and uncontrollable. They all want to have a good fight with me, so it's possible that they aren't under your control. That's why you're using such a clumsy method to limit my power and satisfy them, right? The smile on Lezivim's face froze again. Obviously, Noah's guess was right. To Lezivim, Noah's another cosmology was a huge threat. However, to these evil dragons, it would only arouse their fighting spirit. However, against Noah who used the another cosmology, these evil dragons would lose no matter how strong they were. Therefore, to prevent the evil dragons from losing control and challenging Noah, which would lead to another great defeat for the disaster squad, Lezivim could only use this method to limit Noah's power. This way, both sides would not have to use their trump cards, and it would satisfy the evil dragon's fighting spirit. Why not? As for losing, as long as Noah did not use the another cosmology, with such a lineup, how could the disaster squad lose? That was indeed the case. However, Lezivim had miscalculated something. All right. I agree to your conditions. Noah's gaze swept across the evil dragons, and the corners of his mouth slowly rose. But, who is my opponent? Don't tell me you're all planning to come at me together. Lord Evil Dragons. With that one sentence, the atmosphere of the scene changed completely. Chapter 1921. If he wanted to go against Noah, he had to at least find a way to deal with his another cosmology. Although this idea was simple, it was the most correct one. If he did not find a way to deal with Noah's another cosmology, then other than humans, no matter how many other beings came, they would not be able to win against Noah. However, how could the so-called another cosmology be so easy to deal with? It was a power that was above the 3 digits of the box court and was equal to the 2 digits. If this kind of power was so easy to deal with, then Az Dakaha, who had transformed into a human in the final trial, would not have been a threat to the entire box court. Even the War God Council had to collectively descend from the heavens to become a human and drop their own spiritual level to put a seal on his shoulders and head. Since strength alone could not deal with it, then Lezivim could only think of a way to deal with Noah. The only way to make Noah hesitate and not use the another cosmology was to make it so that Noah wouldn't attack Noah for fear of breaking the vases. In view of this, Lezivim used the Holy Grail as a condition and the entire vampire kingdom as a hostage to force Noah to give up on using the another cosmology. Unfortunately, although Lezivim was thinking of ways to deal with Noah, he forgot that there were many uncertainties in his own camp. The uncontrollable evil dragons were one thing, but their self-esteem was another. Lezivim had obviously forgotten. For these extremely dangerous and extremely battle-thirsty evil dragons, was it possible for them to join forces to deal with a human? The answer was naturally no. Are you kidding me? Glendale was the first to speak. How can we attack together? I'll go alone. I personally agree that we can't attack together, Radon retorted in a flat tone. But, you've already fought with the God Slayer, so it should be me next. Who would give it to you? Nidhogg was drooling as he roared crazily. That's my food, no one is allowed to take it from me. That should have been my line. Azzy Dahaka exclaimed. That's my prey. I'll tear anyone who dares to snatch it from me. Tear him apart. Tear him apart. The other 2 heads of Az Dahaka also shouted. Their words sounded like a child's nonsense, but it gave off an extremely dangerous feeling, as if he could really do it. Under such circumstances, Krone Kovac frowned and said, I also want to fight the current Red Dragon Emperor. But, just like Glendale, you've fought him before, right? Apahis smiled. Since that's the case, I can't give it to you. Hearing this, Klon Kyovaka's frown deepened. I still have a debt to settle with that human. Glendale looked at the surrounding evil dragons, and a dangerous glint appeared in his eyes. Are you trying to stop me? What? Do you want to fight? Maiden laughed in a low voice. Have you thought it through? You who are good at attacking, and I, who are good at defending, have very poor compatibility, right? You can't beat me, can you? I'm best at eating. Nidhogg raised his head and bared his teeth as he spoke. Whoever dares to snatch food from me, be prepared to be eaten by me first. So you're saying that the evil dragons have to fight to determine the winner? Dahaka pursed his lips. That's not bad, although you're not my match. We're not your match. We're not your match. Dahaka's other two heads were simply adding insult to injury, and it angered Glendale, Maiden, and Nidhogg. However, it had to be said that Dahaka's words were correct. In terms of strength, as one of the strongest evil dragons, Dahaka was only below the Sky Dragon. He was far stronger than Glendale, Maiden, and Nidhogg. Klon Kovac and Apophis, on the other hand, laughed. If the winner can fight the Red Dragon Emperor, then I don't mind. I can also play along and leave the Godslayer for last. It's not bad to deal with the competition around me first. As expected, although they looked very rational, Kron Kovac and Apophis were both evil dragons and were very dangerous. All right. Glendale was so angry that he laughed. If that's the case, then let's fight first. The winner can fight that human. Glendale's disregard for the difference in strength caused the atmosphere among the evil dragons to turn frightening. Wait. What's the situation now? Lezivim reacted and hurriedly spoke. I say, evil dragon lords, why do you have to fight amongst yourselves now of all times? What's wrong? Prince. Maiden glanced at Lezivim. Do you want to interfere? I advise you not to interfere. Nidhogg stuck out his tongue and licked the corner of his mouth. I haven't tasted the Demon King's son, so don't force me to eat you. Such an arrogant statement made Lezivim's expression turn ugly, but he still smiled apologetically. Since one of you is fighting, all of you are fighting. Why don't you all come at me together? Why don't you all fight first? Hearing Lezivim's words, the surrounding air turned chilly. The evil dragons immediately looked at Lezivim with pity in their eyes. As expected, you're just the Demon King's son in the end. Apophis said calmly. You don't even know the most basic honor and self-respect. No wonder the demon realm is now ruled by the two surpassers, Sarzax Gimli and Ichuka Astalot, and not you, the demon prince of planet Chiming. The evil dragon's pitiful gazes and Apophis's disdain made Lezivim's expression contort. Who cares so much about you? Lezivim roared furiously and raised the Holy Grail floating above his palm. Your lives are now in my hands. You were all revived by the Holy Grail. If I stop the Holy Grail, you will all die. Do you want to die? All of the evil dragons fell silent upon hearing this. TSK. As Dahaka clicked his tongue, as if he had completely lost interest. I thought I could have a good fight with the God Slayer, but it turned out like this. Boring. Forget it, go and play by yourselves. I won't keep you company. I won't keep you company. I won't keep you company. After saying that, as Dahaka activated a teleportation formation below him and left without hesitation. Lezivim was dumbfounded. He left. He left just like that. What was this? While Lezivim was still in a daze, Apophis spoke in an equally cold tone. I won't keep you company either. You can fight among yourselves. A similar teleportation array appeared beneath Apophis, and he disappeared without a trace. Wait. Lezivim's eyes widened. Then, Klon Kovac also turned around. I won't be restrained by the Holy Grail. I'm only moving with you to fight against the strong. Since you can't satisfy me, I'll act on my own from now on. After saying that, Klon Kovacs disappeared. One of the strongest evil dragons had left Lezivim's camp. As for the remaining 3 evil dragons, they were even more direct. didn't you want to fight with him? I'll let you have him. Glendale, I hope you can win, Your Highness. Radon, you made me lose my appetite. Fortunately, there's still half of that giant monster left. It's just enough to fill my stomach. Nidhogg, after saying that, Glendale, Radon, and Nidhogg disappeared in a flash of light from the teleportation formation. You bastards. Lezoim finally came back to his senses and cursed out loud in rage. Who gave you permission to leave? All of you, return. Before he could finish his sentence, a flash of light pierced through the space and swept past Lezoim's body. Splat! Along with a tearing sound, an arm was thrown into the air with crimson blood spurting out. The smell of blood filled the air.